This libertarian seminar is called to order. First order of business, the chair recognizes Eric to give remarks briefer than 5 minutes about his encounter with John Mearsheimer.
Yeah, John Mearsheimer update a little bit. I finally had a personal encounter. When you see someone on screen for a long time, many times, you kind of want to see him in person. So I went to the seminar at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. The title is not important, but the title is about U.S. and China relationship, whether it's a rivalry or cooperation, coexistence, that sort of thing. So the panel has John Mearsheimer and the other fellow from Harvard, called Miller. Yeah, Rana Miller or Miller. Anyway, so I had a question for him, but by the way, it's John Mearsheimer, according to the person, man himself. It's not John Mearsheimer. Because before I kind of asked around. I was wondering why I talked to sort of people. It should be John Mearsheimer or John Mearsheimer. Most of them said Mearsheimer was kind of German. Say why don't you ask him? I said, well, I probably, if they call on me, I only have one question. I don't want to use it on that, right? But someone said, why don't you ask him after it's adjourned? I was like, that's a good idea. So I asked a question, and I asked that after it's adjourned. So it was a pretty perfect meeting for me. So, oh yeah, my update about him. Yeah, they're kind of interesting. I said, Professor, can I have a quick question? Because this adjourned, he was talking to other people that ready to get off the stage. He said, yeah, what's up? I said, it's Mearsheimer or Mearsheimer. He is Mearsheimer. Then I said, well, I'm gonna tell my British friend. He said, oh, both are okay, or both are right, or I can't remember his word. Both are okay, or both are right, or both something. So he's pretty slick, right? Because he doesn't want to correct people for that. But my impression on him is first time in person, as opposed to I follow him on screen at different YouTube videos, so I'm pretty familiar with his thing. So my impression on him is he's using the realism. He's the leading figure of international realism as opposed to international liberalism. He's been using that for all his life. I think it doesn't have much new to offer. That's my impression. Of course, it's still pretty applicable, relevant for the topic at hand. But still, my impression is the guy doesn't have new stuff. He's just reusing the stuff for different things. Because the question I asked him is, you have a book, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics. Yeah. I said, does that theory, or how well that theory can be applicable to other powers, like middle-sized power, medium-sized power, or small powers? So his answer was applicable to medium-sized power. He doesn't use that. He said Japan, those are like a secondary kind of power. But for small powers, they're not really powers. Like Luxembourg, there's not really power, so there's no power thing to talk about. So he wanted to use this theory on not just Russia, China, U.S., to the top tier, even India. He wanted to be applicable to second-tier powers. So my impression is it doesn't have much new stuff. He has to use that. He has to argue for application or applicability of his old stuff. Number two, he did mention like China. He said China is considering, I can't remember the context, someone asked him a question or something. China considered South China Sea its inner lake. I was like, I didn't argue. This is not an occasion or place for debate. But I just like, nothing can be further from the truth. But I'm not that because that's not the place either. So it's obvious he was obviously wrong, and the way he was wrong is like very simplistic, almost like a teenager talking. If I talk to someone who's ignorant, that's what they would say, right? Number two, he said, oh, someone asked him about Taiwan, would China attack Taiwan? He said, well, China doesn't have the capability. That's obviously, to me, it's obviously wrong again. We're not talking about 2010, 2015, 2020 today. China can crush Taiwan like this, okay? Besides, China doesn't want to do that.
Like how?
Like this.
Oh
It's
my
just
God.
easy, yeah.
Okay.
But there are multiple layers. I'm not going to get into detail because China doesn't want to do that. They want it because that's theirs. If you break it, it's yours, right? They can blockade, right? They don't even want to blockade. They want to talk. Maybe if they blockade, they can force talk, right? So yeah, for him to say that, it's another very simplistic kind of thing.
Wait, he
Doesn't
said,
fit him.
What did I'm getting confused about what you said versus what
Oh
he
yeah.
said.
He said China does not have the capability
I heard that
to do the landing.
Right.
He's
but how
probably
about
implying.
the blockade and talk?
I say China, even China wants to land
Yeah.
Normandy style. Well, nobody will do Normandy style. That's 1944, right? They have, if they want to land, like forcibly land, they definitely have the capability.
But you're saying that China wants to talk. That's Eric
China
talking?
does, yeah. They don't want to do that, right?
I'm just trying to be clear about what he said versus what you're saying.
He said China does not have the capability.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, in the context of U.S. want to intervene, that would be disaster. China will have a war. You don't want to have war with
Because
China.
it's very reassuring for me to hear you say that you don't think China wants to attack.
Oh.
Because I don't claim to be an expert, but it's the kind of thing I worry about because I don't want it to happen.
China wants to be on the table. They don't want to take it off the table.
Absolutely.
So you will that will force you to think other options instead
Absolutely.
of. If they say we take it off the table, and then when the cats are away, the mice will play, right? That sort of thing. So that's an impression. That's my update of my impression in person encounter. He made those unseeming mistakes. It's not him. You know, if it's some ignorant guy from the street or a teenager, they will say the same thing. Then I understand. It's just not like him. That's my impression. Number one, he's using his stuff. Or he doesn't seem to have new stuff. You know, the great power politics, essentially. And then number two, he made those obvious mistakes. For me, it's like not like him. It should be like a lower level intelligence.
Well, I would like to just quickly make a point. I was dearly hoping that because there's a problem evidently with the return capsule on the Chinese space station, I thought, wow, this is a wonderful opportunity if like SpaceX could step up and send a capsule to rescue the cosmonauts, whatever they're called. I thought that would just be fantastic. Taikonauts. That would have been evidently the Chinese have their own rescue mission, which I'm glad they have that. But wouldn't it be great to have an international thing? So I mean, it's a chance to let's stop yelling at each other and do something.
They excluded China. They excluded China in 1990.
I know. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm not blaming China. I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
If you saw the movie The Martian, the Chinese rocket saves the U.S. Is very helpful in saving the U.S. Astronaut whatever who's stranded on Mars. If you haven't seen that movie or read the book,
I kind of know
How
that
old
movie.
is Mearsheimer?
Anyway.
I think he looks like he's in his
thought it was
late
a cancer.
70s or something.
I mean, is he
It's like
still
the
in a
ping pong,
post-World War II American hegemony? We're the only ones who could do.
Post-Cold War, he's saying the liberals, international liberals, they're still hanging on to the American hegemony. And I try to sort it out, but he's the way they hold on to it. They think they can use that to advance other agenda like democracy, human rights. But Mearsheimer is a realist. He said, we need to focus on security competition with China, with not even Russia, just China. Not doing the liberal thing, democracy,
But his
human rights.
underestimation of China, I'm wondering if that's a factor of just an older mindset.
He's kind of new. It depends on what you mean by older mindset. Older mindset is like we want democracy, the neocon stuff. He's like, we need to be realistic, and we probably have to accept that we are multipolar now, not just unipolar, like right after the Cold War in the 1990s, even 2000s. But now we need to be realistic. It's multipolar. We need to, and it's inevitable. and therefore it's tragedy that there's a security competition between two powers. So we need to be careful with that. But that's inevitable. He's not promoting it. It's not to say to stop it. It's just the way it is. That's being realistic.
David, what was the conflict when you have a hegemony and then you have a new up and coming hegemony? What it was the
Is that one of the turnings?
Thucydides.
Thucydides?
Oh, Thucydides
Thucydides
trap.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get. Thucydides trap. Okay.
Yeah, and Mearsheimer is a big believer in Thucydides' trap.
But one of the tenets of warfare is don't underestimate your opponent.
Right.
Your attitude of, well, they couldn't do that or they don't have that, you know.
The hot war doesn't have to break out because he, a couple of times in the talk, especially in the Q&A, some young guy say, wow, what are the chances of winning if we fight China? He said, it's a scary thought. It's like, for him, it's like apocalypse. He doesn't want to even think about it. So that's different from Thucydides.
Oh, I'm
He's
sorry.
emphasizing the security competition. The competition it's inevitable, but not the war. So we can do security competition, but not in a war like a hard war, like essentially another Cold War, or something similar to that. But he's not predicting, or he's not holding that there's going to be a war.
But would he be
like
aware
the
of
other
hacking
Harvard guy,
or
Ellison.
hacking a grid, or is he aware of small drones, little tiny drones that any of us could afford to buy, or hacking a grid, or cyber warfare, or me either hacking into your state secrets, or shutting your electric grid down, or putting emails in your name? You know, is he aware
like false
of
flag or something.
that type of?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure.
I think
I'm not
Russians
sure
are
what he
very good
thinks
at
about
it,
it.
I believe. And
Well, of course, if you're really good at it, you don't talk about it, and so you don't know.
And nowadays you can use AI to do it.
Yeah.
And on that note, we will end that order of business and go to the topic at hand, which is
Can I ask a question here? Is everybody familiar, since we've been talking about John Mearsheimer, is everybody familiar what happened to him several years ago when he came out with a book? I've forgotten the name of it. You know the name of the book I'm talking
The book about the lobby?
About the
Israel lobby?
The Israel lobby.
Oh.
that you're so
He was
fond of.
basically, they couldn't fire
Yeah,
him.
it's
They
fixed,
couldn't
I
fire
will
him
neither
because he was
confirm nor
tenured.
deny.
It's fixed up.
But they basically muzzled him for a while. They got him. He didn't do much of anything for a couple of years. He did a little bit. Now he's back into things again.
Yeah, the best way to prove that it's just a trope is to flex your muscles and silence someone. Just prove that it's a trope, that you have that kind of influence and power. All right, so the topic at hand is David Ramsay Steele with Karl Marx's Simple Mistake.
Okay, one little formality, Victor. This is from Lee.
This is what?
I cannot accept it in good conscience, no.
What the
Well, I'd like to say that if nobody else wants to take it, I'll feel obligated to take it. So,
You trust me, you don't want to take it.
okay.
You don't know what that means.
No. It's significant to you, but not to me. That's the whole point.
Oh my God, that's one of the best things ever. I swear to God. Okay. All right.
Right, so Karl Marx's Simple Mistake. Now, in the 1960s, I was a Marxist, and I ceased to be a Marxist in the early 70s because I concluded that the kind of future society Marx was in favor of and believed was inevitable actually cannot come into existence. So that was the root of my disagreement with Marx and my rejection of Marx. And it took me a long time to write my first book, but that came out in 1992, and it's all about that issue of whether communism, as Marx defined it, is a possibility. And I conclude that it's not. Now, many people criticized Marx And I've noticed that Jordan Peterson is always trying to find some ill will on the part of Marx, that Marx had bad intentions. Personally, I think Marx had excellent good intentions, just like I did when I was a Marxist. I didn't have any evil intentions. I just wanted what was best for humankind. And I think that was what motivated Marx. I think he genuinely had good motives. And I do think there's a lot of chit-chat on the internet attributes bad motives to people, and that's a bad thing to do, because the motives that people have are completely immaterial. All that matters is the strength of their arguments. And I think Marx made some mistakes. Another thing I object to about a lot of discourse on the internet is people are always accusing other people of lying, when what they mean is they're saying something that the speaker believes is untrue. Well, instead of accusing people of lying, I think one should accuse them of making mistakes. And that's what I intend to do with regard to Marx. So Jordan Peterson, for example, is always attacking Marx, and I must say he hasn't taken the precaution of finding out what Marx argued for or wrote, and that is a problem. But Jordan Peterson has this idea that if something evil has happened in the world, it's because people had evil intentions. And I don't agree with that. I think that very often the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think Marx's good intentions don't excuse his mistakes. The other thing, so I mean, I'm keen on the word mistake. In this context, I'm keen on the word simple. What I want to talk about is something very, very simple. Marx was had a very subtle mind and had all sorts of ideas. And I've been greatly entertained by many of these ideas and impressed by many of these ideas. But I'm interested in one specific mistake that Marx made. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to state what Marx thought in a very dogmatic fashion without giving any citations from Marx. And then a few minutes later, I will read some passages from Marx so that you can see that what I was saying was correct, but also will bring out some other aspects of what Marx believed. Marx believed that business firms will indefinitely get bigger and bigger. Now, if you say that, probably a lot of people will react by saying, well, that's right, isn't it? Business firms have got bigger and bigger. So the point to grasp is that Marx believed that business firms would get bigger and bigger and fewer and fewer. That, as Marx put it, one capitalist always kills many. That the future would be, according to Marx, inevitably would be fewer and fewer firms and bigger firms. And naturally, if you believe that, you're inclined to think about the ultimate end of this process, which would be everything owned by a single big firm. And Marx noted that and made a reference to it, which is quite interesting. So this is Marx's view, that automatically, because of the way capitalism is structured and because of the way competition takes place in capitalism, the future lies with fewer and fewer firms, bigger and bigger firms, tending in the direction of a single big firm owning everything. So that's what I'm saying Marx said, and I will provide some evidence for it shortly. Let me give a few facts about, simple facts about the United States right now, or at least a couple of years ago, which is how long it takes to put statistics together. So, over 50% of private sector employment in the US today, and over 40% of output comes from small businesses, defined as having less than 500 employees. There are, in the United States today, 33.2 million small businesses, and more than 80% of those have no employees. They're single-person, self-employed businesses. This is 160 years after Marx wrote Volume 1 of Capital. This doesn't look like a confirmation of Marx's expectations. I should perhaps say something about the way Marx argues. Marx and his friend Engels, who thought on this kind of topic exactly the same, they don't ever say, here's a great idea, it's communism, and here are the advantages, and here are the arguments in favor of it. And here's proof that it's going to be very easy to get and it's going to work. Marx and Engels never argue like that. What they do is they state as a fact what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen. They state this as though it's a series of facts. They obviously thought that this was a superior way to argue, that this was more scientific. Actually, I think it's less scientific, but I don't want to get distracted too much. But that's the way they argue. Now, you can, however, tell from certain clues that they do have a dog in the fight, that they're not entirely neutral. And there are different ways that comes out. It comes out in this constant moralizing tone about how evil capitalism is. This is constant in Marx and Engels. It also comes out in whenever they talk about what communists ought to do, because then it becomes clear that what communists ought to do is bring forward the coming of communism, which they have stated is totally inevitable, right? So, they are in fact advocating communism, but they never appear to be, because they're just saying this is what happens, and this is what inevitably follows from that, and then this inevitably follows from that. That's the way they talk. So. I suppose I should say something about the general psychological phenomenon that when people think about business firms, they're always more impressed by the few big firms than they are by the numerous small firms. And people often tend to suppose that the big firms is where it's all happening. But in fact, the vast majority of the economy is in the hands of rather small firms. And there is no indication that this is ever going to go away. So it's pretty clear that Marx and Engels believed that the tendency of capitalism to move towards one big firm is a precursor of communism, because communism will be like one big firm. It will be one big planning agency encompassing the whole population. So, so this is one of Marx's proofs that communism is inevitably coming, is the fact that business firms get bigger and bigger, not just in absolute terms, but comparatively. They get bigger and bigger and fewer, moving in the direction of one big firm. So, by the way, the numbers I gave for the United States, I did quickly look at some other countries. And it's difficult to make comparisons because, for one thing, in the United States, they define, a small business is defined as less than 500 employees, whereas in most countries, the way they do their official statistics is a much smaller number of employees for calling it a small business. However, it is true that in all major industrialized countries, in Russia, in China, in Germany, in Britain, there's a huge number of small businesses. In fact, in most countries that are industrialized, the proportion of small businesses is actually higher than it is in the US. So in Germany and Britain and France, it's higher than in the US. So, I haven't got any statistics on China, but if you read about China, you keep coming across the tremendous importance of small businesses. And most of them, of course, started by Chinese people, but it's comparatively easy for a Westerner to go to China and start a small business. If they've got savings, they can start a small business, and the cultural and political environment for doing that is very favourable. And certainly in Russia, there is a huge number of small businesses, and if you start reading about the Russian economy, you keep coming upon this. So this is not a peculiarity. It's not a quirk. It's not something strange and inexplicable. It's a fact. Small businesses are here to stay, and they're not going away. I'm going to give a few quotations now from Marx in order to substantiate that this was his view. Let me see. Oh yes, I've got my copy of. This is the book I had in the 1960s. It's volume 1 of Capital. I've got all the volumes of Capital. At one point, I hadn't looked at these for many years, and I thought, oh, I'll look at those because it would be fun to see what I wrote in the margin when I was a convinced Marxist. What I'd forgotten was that in those days, in Britain, in my neck of the woods in Britain, it was considered a real outrage to deface a book by writing in the margin. So actually, all the stuff that's written in the margin is in the 70s, after I turned against Marxism. I don't have some of those what should have been immortal insights that I had when I was a Marxist. So they're gone with the wind. Let me give some examples of what Marx said. Okay, so these are mostly now from volume 1 of Capital. Marx decided around about 1850 that he was going to write this great work in what was then called political economy. And he spent years every day in the reading room of the British Museum, which was basically the world's biggest library, reading everything that had ever been written by anybody on the subject of political economy. Political economy later became called economics. But it's the same thing. There's not anything particularly political about it. Political economy comes from two Greek words, meaning, well, the economy is derived from the word for household. Polis is the city-state, so it's treating society, in other words, a city-state, as a household. That's the idea of political economy. The subheading to volume to capital is Das Kapital. He wrote it in German, Das Kapital, which means capital, because we English don't use definite articles as much as Germans do. He subtitled it A Critique of Political Economy. Critique in those days did not mean a debunking or a refutation. It meant a critical examination, hopefully to improve what you're examining and turn it into something better. That's the going back to Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason. That's what critique means. It's not a debunking. So this is Marx trying to do political economy. It just so happens that Marx was very unfortunate, or fortunate maybe. You be the judge. Shortly after he completed Volume 1 of Capital, there was a revolution in economics, a revolution in political economy, and we call it the marginalist revolution. It's based on three thinkers in the 1870s, Karl Menger, William Stanley Jevons, and Leon Walras. Each of them independently came up with what is now called the marginalist approach, and that led to neoclassical economics, which is basically the kind of economics you learn in a university today. I share the general view that a lot of the ways of approaching things that Marx did in Capital were outmoded and transcended by this marginalist revolution. So Marx is living in the world of David Ricardo and John Stuart Mill, neither of whom experienced the marginalist revolution. And he had an opportunity if he'd followed things that were going on around him, but he didn't. And as far as we can tell, he didn't know anything about it. So a lot of the approaches in Capital are outmoded because of the marginalist revolution. Now let me just give some quotes here. The battle of competition is fought by cheapening of commodities. The cheapness of commodities depends, ceteris paribus, on the productiveness of labour, and this again on the scale of production. Therefore, the larger capital beats the smaller. This is a general rule that Marx has. A big firm is in competition with a small firm. The big firm is going to defeat the small firm. It may acquire the small firm, or it may just put it out of business by producing cheaper goods.
Economy of scale.
Because of economies of scale, right? So, in fact, we can sum up Marx's view, although he didn't talk like this, that there are economies of scale and there are no diseconomies of scale. That's Marx's conviction. So now. Here's just a few lines after that one. With the development of the capitalist mode of production, there is an increase in the minimum amount of individual capital necessary to carry on a business. So one of the things about Marx is he's always looking for things that confirm his theory. And one of the things that confirms his theory that firms are going to get bigger and bigger and fewer is that it's going to be harder and harder to start a business, because the minimum capital you need to start a business keeps getting bigger. So this is the point he's making here. To carry on a business under its normal conditions, the smaller capitals therefore crowd into spheres of production which modern industry has only sporadically or incompletely got hold of. So, you know, again, you see here his self-confirming a bias he's looking for things which will fit into the picture that small businesses are disappearing. You can look around London, where Marx was living at this time, you see plenty of evidence. There are thousands of small businesses, so you've got to say something about them. So what Marx says is they're concentrating on parts of industry which capitalism has only incompletely got hold of. You know, in other words, there's something temporary and makeshift and transitory about them. They're going to disappear. Yeah, on this same page, he talks about credit and how credit makes it easier to have huge businesses. And this is like slightly suspicious because what credit does is it's able to pool the savings of numerous people. So even though there might be big concerns and big undertakings that take place because of credit, Marx also thinks that the number of capitalists gets smaller all the time. Each capitalist who survives as a capitalist is richer and richer and richer, and there are fewer and fewer and fewer of them, because capitalists who are defeated in competition go down into the proletariat. Cursed thought. Let's find another. Capital can grow into powerful masses in a single hand, because here capital can grow into powerful masses in a single hand because there it has been withdrawn from many individual hands. In any given branch of industry, centralization, he uses the word centralization in a special sense to mean one particular kind of what we would call concentration of capital. Centralization would reach its extreme limit. Oh, and this is where he makes this point. Centralization would reach its extreme limit if all the individual capitals, by capital he means a business enterprise, a firm, invested in it were I'm trying to read this in this poor light, were fused into. No, I don't want it because that makes the glare on my face. We had a discussion about this. Into a single capital. If all these capitals were fused into a single capital, in a given society, the limit would be reached only when the entire social capital was united in the hands of either a single capitalist or a single capitalist company. So there you see that he does see that the limit of the tendency that he is identifying means one big firm owning everything. And this is obviously congenial to someone who's a communist, because it's part of Marx's theory that the coming of communism abolishes the market. There is going to be no buying and selling. There is going to be no money in a communist society. There is going to be planning. Everything is going to be planned. Where do we see planning? We see planning in a firm. So one big firm means the whole of the economy of the world is going to be in the hands of a single organization. Now, he does think this single organization will be controlled by the mass of the population democratically. But that's something that he does believe very strongly, but I'm not going to go into it because I'm just controverting this idea that everything gets bigger and bigger and fewer. Now here's a very interesting one, quotation from Marx. And this is an idea which both Marx and Engels repeatedly refer to. the same bourgeois mind which praises division of labour in the workshop, lifelong annexation of the labourer to a partial operation, and his complete subjection to capital, value judgment there, possibly, as being an organisation of labour that increases its productiveness, that same bourgeois mind denounces with equal vigour every conscious attempt to socially control and regulate the process of production as an inroad upon such sacred things as the right of property, freedom, and unrestricted play for the bent of the individual capitalist. It is very characteristic that the enthusiastic apologists of the factory system have nothing more damning to urge against a general organisation of the labour of society than that it would turn all society into one immense factory. So you see, what he's saying is that the typical bourgeois enthusiast for capitalism is caught in a kind of paradox or contradiction, because he's saying planning and even to a despotic degree in the workshop or in the factory is a great thing, but outside the workshop, when we're talking about the interaction of all the workshops, it's the last thing that he wants, and so there is a contradiction here. Now, of course, this has a kind of boomerang as well, because one might say that Marx is suggesting that there should be something despotic about the communist system. But anyway, he's not thinking about that, you see. He's saying there's something inconsistent, and that capitalism, as one of the things that Marx and Engels are always saying, is capitalism has achieved wonderful things. It's great. It's done all these things that nobody dreamed were possible. And it's done this by planning production, right? Because you look at a factory and it's a miracle of coordination by conscious direction, and there's something inconsistent or faulty in people who don't see that if we take this to the next degree, it means the whole of society has to be coordinated by planning, by direction, and so this is something that Marx and Engels are always coming back to. It seems like an invincible argument, because after all, if you think that planning is so wonderful in one business, why wouldn't it be even better for the whole of society, right? There may be an answer to that, but this is what they thought. Yes, so Marx and Engels frequently refer to what's going on in capitalism as anarchy. Anarchy of production. They keep on using this phrase. Hundreds of times they use this. It's an anarchic system. And the implication is it's obviously going to be an improvement if we get rid of this anarchy and substitute direction, hierarchy, planning. Engels says in this in a book I'm going to refer to shortly, Engels wrote a book in 1880, so it's getting to the end of Marx's life, called Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. So I have to make a couple of points here about the meaning of the word socialism and communism. In the 1840s, the words both socialism and communism became familiar to intellectuals, to people who read books. And that was partly because of a book by, what was his name now? It'll come to me. he wrote a book, The Socialism and Communism of Present-Day France. It was in German for a German audience. And he said there are these people in Paris who believe in socialism and others who believe in communism. And the main difference between them is that that socialism retains some kind of a price system, whereas communism abolishes buying and selling completely. So there's no money in communism. So from that point on, people became aware of these two terms, socialism and communism. Marx and Engels at that point, in the 1840s, decided that they were communists and thus opposed to the people calling themselves socialists. And they maintained this verbal recipe for some time, for several decades, in fact. They were communists, and so a few years after that book, they wrote the Communist Manifesto of the Communist Party, and they deliberately chose the word communism, not socialism. And that went on for quite some time. But then, in the 1870s, what started happening was that there was a growth of socialist parties in various European countries. And the biggest of these socialist parties was the German social, and that was like a model for all socialist parties. And so this was such a big phenomenon that the Marxists decided they would unite with the anti-Marxists, and that meant, instead of saying we're communists and opposed to socialism, saying we are socialists. And what they started saying was we are scientific socialists instead of utopian socialists. So in Germany, the mass socialist movement was started by a man called Ferdinand Lassalle. And so in the 1870s, you had the Lassallians were an influential group of intellectuals who advocated a kind of socialism. But they were holding talks with the people who were called Eisenachers, because there were a lot of them in the town of Eisenach, but they were actually Marxists. And so as a result of this, the Marxists went along with no longer calling themselves socialists, but calling themselves, no longer calling themselves communists, but calling themselves socialists. So that was, in fact, they united the German Social Democratic Party. In all these countries at that time, socialism and social democracy were absolutely interchangeable. If you were a socialist, you were a social democrat. If you were a social democrat, you were a socialist. Right? They're completely interchangeable. So you had these Marxists who had been saying we're communists, not socialists, suddenly saying we're socialists. And the Marxists were much better at persuading other intellectuals, so that quite rapidly the vast majority of socialist intellectuals became Eisenachers. They became Marxists, and other pre-Marxian kinds of socialism, like Lassallianism, just tended to lose support. So you thus had by the 1880s, you definitely have this new situation where the Marxists are all calling themselves socialists or social democrats, same thing. There is a legend that Marx thought that socialism would come before communism. This is not true. Lenin said that socialism would come before communism, and that he said that for the first time in 1917. But it's never, before that, no Marxist had ever said socialism comes before communism. This isn't terrifically important, but it is a little point that people often get wrong. So anyway, there we are.
I had wondered that.
Yes. So let me go ahead to. If you want to learn what Marxism is all about, I would recommend that you don't go to the Communist Manifesto. It's important to read the Communist Manifesto, but it's not the first thing you should read. The first thing you should read is chapter 32 of volume 1 of Capital. And chapter 32 of volume 1 of Capital is only 3 pages. And you can skip the first page, because the first page is all about what led up to capitalism. The second page is all about what's going on in capitalism. And the third page is all about how capitalism inevitably leads to communism. Marx had a way with words. He was very good at purple prose. I'll read a couple of things from chapter 32 of Capital. By the way, I used to, when I talked about Marx, I used to explain to people that chapter 32 is not at the end of volume 1, it's the penultimate chapter. And that was because, in order to fool the censor, because most European countries had censorship of books. You had to, if you wanted to publish a book, you had to submit it to the government censor, and you'd be a criminal if they said no, and you went ahead and printed it. So this was true in Prussia, so the idea was that if you made the last chapter, the censors would be lazy because they are civil servants and we know how they behave, and they wouldn't read the whole book. They'd read the first few lines and the last few lines. And if the last chapter was really dull and dry and obviously not in the least bit revolutionary, then they would say, yeah, this is okay. And that was why Marx and Engels, when they were arranging for the publication of volume 1 of Capital, they put this chapter on the end, chapter 33, which is completely dull, completely uninteresting, completely unimportant. But so really, chapter 32 was the finale, so Capital Volume 1 is a book about how capitalism works. But as you get through it, it starts more and more to be pointing towards the coming communism, which will supplant capitalism. But recently, I haven't kept up to speed on all the latest translations and so on. But the other day, I was looking at something, and I noticed that in a particular recent edition of Volume 1, they do make chapter 32 the last chapter, which is what was the original idea. So I don't have to make that little speech about why it's the last chapter without being the last chapter, because in these new editions it is the last chapter. Okay, so so as soon as this process of transformation, he's talking about what goes on in capitalism, has sufficiently decomposed the old society from top to bottom, as soon as the labourers are turned into proletarians, their means of labour into capital, as soon as the capitalist mode of production stands on its own feet, then the further socialisation of labour and further transformation of the land and other means of production into socially exploited and therefore common means of production, as well as the further expropriation of private proprietors, takes a new form. That which is now to be expropriated is no longer the labourer working for himself, but the capitalist exploiting many labourers. This expropriation is accomplished by the action of the immanent laws of capitalist production itself, by the centralisation of capital. One capitalist always kills many. Hand in hand with this centralization, or this expropriation of many capitalists by few, develop on an ever-extending scale the cooperative form of the labour process, the conscious technical application of science, the methodical cultivation of the soil, the transformation of the instruments of labour into instruments of labour only usable in common, the economising of all means of production by their use as the means of production of combined socialised labour, the entanglement of all peoples in the net of the world market, and with this, the international character of the capitalist regime. You see here this persuasive prose which draws attention to undoubted facts mixed in with slightly dubitable facts to support the driving narrative that this is all leading to communism. It's very, very well done. Centralisation of the means of production and socialisation of labour at last reach a point where they become incompatible with their capitalist integument. Thus, this integument is burst asunder. The knell of capitalist private property sounds. The expropriators are expropriated. I'm going to read the last paragraph because it's very interesting. The transformation of scattered private property arising from individual labour into capitalist private property is naturally a process incomparably more protracted, violent and difficult than the transformation of capitalistic private property, already practically resting on socialised production, into socialised property. So what he's saying there is the transition from capitalism to communism is going to be simpler, easier and less violent than the way in which capitalism came into being by uniting scattered private property. It's very much implicit in Marx, and it became more explicit that as capitalism keeps on developing, and it's getting closer and closer to communism because it's heading towards one big firm, the opportunities for a totally peaceful transition get more and bigger. And in fact, Marx commits himself to the view, and Engels does too, that in countries with a well-developed liberal democratic order, it will be peaceful. It will not require a violent revolution. It'll be a social revolution because you're going to abolish private property. That's not a little thing. But it will be peaceful. And this is one of the things that, because a lot of people on the left, they find glamour in violence, and so they love to emphasize. But in fact, no. Marx and Engels, both of them, and you notice, for example, right at the beginning of the Communist Manifesto, 1848, Europe is haunted by a spectre, the spectre of communism. Not a word about America, because they had already decided that that was sufficiently democratic, that a peaceful transition would be possible there. And they're going to talk about the need for a forcible overthrow in the Communist Manifesto. So this is all part of the way in which Marx developed his ideas. So I think I've read enough from Marx himself to show that what I was saying about him was not in any way misleading. I do want to mention this book that Engels wrote. Engels wrote a big book which is all about his differences with a guy called Eugen Dühring. And it became known as Anti-Dühring. Then he selected passages from that and added passages to make a book which is in English is known as Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. And that was written in 1880. If you joined the Marxist movement in the 1880s, you would be told, yeah, the Communist Manifesto has great historical interest, But if you want an up-to-date account of what Marxism is about, read Engels, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. This is the up-to-date statement of Marxism in 1880. Of course, Marx died in 1883, so he was soon gone. But Engels lived for some years after that. So this book, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, it's a short book, about 150 pages, something like that. It's a statement of Marxism as it was conceived in 1880. It has a lot of interesting points. I'm just going to read a few little bits and pieces. Yes, so when Engels was writing this book, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, everybody, not just Marxists, but everybody was talking about the trusts, right? This was the topic of the time. The trusts are taking over in Germany and the United States especially, and the trusts are associations of capitalists to control a whole industry, right? So this is the idea, is that it was very fashionable, and there were a lot of well-publicized attempts by groups of capitalists to, so what would happen typically is the 2 or 3 biggest capitalists in a particular industry would have a meeting with them of themselves and any minor capitalists who still existed, and they would say, we're going to carve up this industry. You so-and-so, you have 10%, you're going to keep 10%. We're going to arrange things so that you always have 10%. And then we're going to act together. And because we act together, we can make monopoly gains. So this was the idea. It never really worked, but it was fashionable. People talked about it. Some people were frightened of it, and of course it led to what we call antitrust, which is efforts by the government to stop people colluding or cooperating to get control of an industry. So this was the big thing when Engels was writing Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. One of the things about Marxists, if you read what they were saying all along, the latest thing is always proof that communism or socialism is just about to happen, you see. So the trusts, this is it, this proves it, right? So, Engels says, in the trusts, freedom of competition changes into its very opposite, into monopoly. And the production without any definite plan of capitalistic society capitulates to the production upon a definite plan of the invading socialistic society. So Engels is saying, these trusts, that's the invasion of capitalism by socialism, even though it's capitalists that are doing it, not workers. This is the social, this is, so there is this acute consciousness throughout at the end of the 19th century and right up to the First World War, there is this acute consciousness that everything that is happening, pick up the newspaper and it tells you communism or socialism is coming now. This is how they saw the world, right? It's like a millennial dawn. Yeah, it's also notable for another thing that Engels says in Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, that the working class come to power, and they turn everything into state property. But as soon as they do that, the state starts to wither away, because their idea that in socialism there will be no state. Why will there be no state? Well, because a state is a product of class society. We're going to abolish the bourgeoisie. That means we abolish the proletariat, because so everybody's going to be equal and not a member of any particular class. Therefore, why would we need a state? So the state disappears. So the proletariat seizes political power and turns the means of production into state property. But in doing this, it abolishes itself as proletariat, abolishes all class distinctions and class antagonisms, abolishes also the state as state. Society thus far, based upon class antagonisms, had need of the state, that is, of an organisation of the particular class which was, pro tempore, the exploiting class, an organisation for the purpose of preventing any interference from without with the existing conditions of production, and therefore especially for the purpose of forcibly keeping the exploited classes in the condition of oppression corresponding with the given mode of production, slavery, serfdom, wage labour. So this is the Marxist picture of the future, and there is this very real awareness, apparent awareness, that we're right on the brink. We're going to get communism or socialism. It's coming tomorrow, and so this is how Marxism developed. And then, of course, you had the First World War, and all the workers, all the socialist workers who said they would never take up arms against their brothers, French against German, German against French, suddenly changed their minds and said, yeah, we think killing French or killing Germans is a great idea. So essentially what happened was there were these socialist parties all over Europe, and they were all committed to proletarian internationalism. But they had immediate demands, and the immediate demands were things like higher old age pensions, higher unemployment pay, more bargaining power to trade unions, a list of things like this. And the workers who voted for these social democratic parties were only interested in the immediate demands. And you know, when they heard people talk about, well, we're all brothers and we're not going to take up arms against the French or the Germans, I think it's a bit like in the Church of England, you know, people said, well, Jesus Christ is going to come for the second time, and we really believe this, but it's not happening today. In the meantime, we'll go and slaughter Germans. You know, it's just, you know, the workers thought about this in a very different way from the way the Marxist intellectuals thought about it. So anyway, that's my that's what I think about Marxism. I do want to, finally, I do want to say something about the Kosian Revolution. I have mentioned this here before, but I'll mention it again. In 1937, a man called Ronald Coase, a young man, he was in his early 20s, just starting out to learn economics, he published an article in a fairly prestigious economics journal, although I have to say academic journals were all prestigious back then because there weren't hundreds and hundreds of them. There were only a few. So he published this article, published in 1937, and it was an idea he'd had since 1932, when he was an adolescent, essentially. And it's called The Nature of the Firm. In this article, he discussed a question which is a twofold question. Why are the firms? Why aren't they just separate individuals who cooperate together for certain common tasks? So why are the firms? And the other side of that, why are there many firms instead of one big firm? So those are the questions that Ronald Coase asked in this article, The Nature of the Firm, 1937. So,
Is the concept of competition not clear to you? That
what's that?
the concept of competition, that if two people competing and I want to run faster to outrun Vic, and when we're in competition, it's a motivation. It's, you know.
Well, that may be, but I mean, if you go into business, you're competing with other people.
But
Yes,
a firm is a cooperative venture.
Right.
It is a group of
Right.
people
Sure,
working
yeah,
together.
anything more than one, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so this is, but you see, this is what Ronald Coase thought about in the 1930s, is the same question that Marx and Engels had raised. If competition is so wonderful, why do we have despotic organisation of the workers in a factory? And if despotic organisation of the workers in a factory is so great, why don't we have that for the whole of society, the whole economy? And so Ronald Coase asked this question, but he started to propose an answer. And so he wrote that article in 1937. It passed unnoticed in the 1940s. Well, there was a war on. It passed unnoticed in the 1950s. It had been published in a good journal. It passed unnoticed in the 1960s. In the 1970s, a tiny handful of people started talking about it. And it was included in a reader of articles about the organisation of industry. And then in the 1980s, suddenly everybody was talking about The Nature of the Firm by Ronald Coase, who had meanwhile moved to Chicago and got a job at teaching economics at the University of Chicago. Now, there is another aspect of this which is quite remarkable. Around about this time, Ronald Coase wrote another article, and that was called The Problem of Social Cost. Both of these articles, The Nature of the Firm and The Problem of Social Cost, revolutionized a wide sector of the economics profession and created new disciplines. The problem of the nature of the firm created, and the discussions about it, of course, created industrial organisation as a university subject. And the problem of social cost created what's called the economics of law, or law and economics, as a university subject. And the thing is, it took all those decades for the nature of the firm to make its impact. But the problem of social cost made its impact immediately. So these two things happened simultaneously. But Ronald Coase suddenly became very famous for both of these articles, one of which he'd written so many decades before, and the other of which he'd just written. And both of them revolutionized a whole big chunk of economics, changed the way economics was taught, and created new disciplines. And both of them involved the notion of transaction costs. So what Coase did in that brilliant paper from 1937, The Nature of the Firm, was he said, well, business people are every day confronted with the choice: shall we do this in-house, or shall we find someone to sell it to us? It's called the make or buy decision. Mm-hmm. So he fastened upon this what came to be called transaction costs. There is a cost in getting someone to do something within the organization, but there is also a cost in getting someone else outside the organization to provide you with it for a price. Both of these have costs, and you look at what happens is you look at this and you make a choice based upon the costs, and that led to a whole new literature on what causes that trade-off to appear different on different occasions, it led to books like this, The Economic Institutions of Capitalism, which is now quite old, 1958, which is all about this whole world of theorizing about economics, opened up by Ronald Coase.
One more time, what's it called?
This one?
Yeah.
The Economic Institutions of Capitalism.
It's kind of got like a John Calvin-esque title.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we're now in a world where this paradox that bothered or didn't bother Marx and Engels, that they thought was an unanswerable conundrum, the only possible solution is communism, is now being constantly investigated in detail by hundreds of economists who are basically ideological children of Ronald Coase. All kinds of discoveries have been made about what it is that causes firms to be bigger or smaller. And the main conclusion, I think, would be, well, one of the conclusions would be, this is not accidental. You know, if you read Marx, you get the impression, well, the only reason that this small firm exists is because it hasn't been taken over by a big firm yet. Right? This is the impression that Marx leaves you with. But in fact, there are very good reasons why firms don't necessarily always try to take over other firms. And I mean, you know, something like the auto industry is a good example. You know, General Motors doesn't make the great majority of what goes into a General Motors car. They order it from other people, other independent firms, who can be replaced if they don't perform appropriately. Why doesn't General Motors take over all those the people that make the headlights, the people
That
that
would be
make
vertical
the
integration.
chassis? Right. Why isn't there more vertical integration? Is another way to put it. There are good reasons why that does not happen. So we're now in a world which has left Marx behind. So my view is that Marx made a simple mistake, and he was very deeply committed to this idea of that firms will get bigger and bigger and bigger. That is leading in the direction of one big firm, and that is automatically next door to communism. But in fact, the whole premise is wrong, because that's not what happens. If you look around the world today, 160 years after Volume 1 of Capital, you can see that there are small businesses everywhere, and they are the mainstay of the economy. You know, they are absolutely essential to any modern industrialized economy. So this is Karl Marx's simple mistake.
On the other hand, also, even with big economies, you tend to have oligarchies or duopolies. So you have like Coke and Pepsi, but in a weird way, Coke kind of needs Pepsi and Pepsi kind of needs Coke. You need that yin yang.
Or Dr. Pepper in this case, because Dr. Pepper's now eclipsed Pepsi from what I've seen.
Oh,
Really?
but you don't
Recently.
have just you have Ford, General Motors, and what was Chrysler is now Stellantis, and so you don't just have one. I think people want to at least have an illusion of choice. They want to choose between Nikes and Reeboks. They don't. I think people want to be able to, even if they use the same manufacturer. I think people want to have that feeling. Consumerism You want to have an ability to choose.
Maybe they do.
You like going into the supermarket and looking at all the different cereals or, this or that. So you're saying that the small businesses are very crucial, but I'm saying even among the massive larger businesses, you either have duopolies or oligopolies,
You mentioned how America could be democracy could make communism more inevitable. Chapter 2 of the manifesto basically lists a bunch of things like government, education, income tax. I don't have the list in front of me, but we currently, the current status quo is we have several of those. So I guess in a way, we've already sort of instituted communism in America.
We have at least 10.
No, this is totally wrong. That's totally wrong, Justin. No, those measures are all bourgeois measures. They do not amount to communism. Communism is the abolition of money, the abolition of buying and selling. And that's actually mentioned in the Communist Manifesto, but it is played down a bit. And the immediate measures in all the, when they first published that, it was anonymous, but then they came out as the authors and they wrote prefaces. And in all the subsequent prefaces, they say, don't pay too much attention to the immediate measures because that's now out of date. And that, we have to remember that in 1847, when they were writing the manifesto of the Communist Party, the vast majority of people in Europe were peasants. They weren't in a capitalist economy.
Wait, hold on. Chair recognizes Eric, and then I'm going to recognize myself in a second.
Okay, I look at this Marx, his error. I try to put myself in his shoes or in his head and try to look around in his time, what he saw. Those are two different things, because what he saw could still be wrong. So you have to put it in his head and try to look around at what was going on at the time. When I read The Capital, I noticed two things. One, he rarely or never talked about international business, international economics. Mm-hmm. And number two, he did not mention or did not consider the advancement of technology. Mm-hmm. So those two, we can theorize. Maybe those two contribute to it.
About technological advances. He's constantly talking about.
He did talk about it.
Bigger and better machines.
Bigger and better machines. But that's not like the kind of quantum leap that we're experiencing in our lifetime, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So relatively, to me, that's not considering efficiently.
It's improving
sufficiently
what you have
considering,
rather than making a technological jump.
Right. So to me, that's we went from machine to information. Yeah. Now we're going to AI. He's not thinking in those terms.
AIs are machines.
Right, you know what I mean. From information, from data to the learning capability, right? And that I don't know, we can theorize it. Maybe that contributes or explains why he made that error. Number two is the capitalism he was referring to or he was seeing is different from the capitalism or capitalist system that we're seeing today with a lot of medium-sized and small-sized firms playing a very important role in the economy. So I think those two things, maybe another thing he didn't see is the capitalism evolve into something else. If Marx woke up in his grave, he looked at this, he said, this is not capitalism, why are you still calling it capitalism? So that's why I'm saying he's just totally different time, different environment, and he didn't foresee this kind of technology advancement. And he doesn't talk about globalism. He doesn't talk about international business. He doesn't know. He was German. He was in England. He didn't talk about France or Germany or England, international cross-borders thing. He didn't even know China could rise like this, or Japan for that matter, or Indonesia. So it's an obvious limitation. But I won't hold it against him because I probably wouldn't fare any better if I was in his time. So that's
Chair
It's hard to
recognizes.
empathize with
your
Chair
somebody
recognizes
that-
Joe, and then Chair recognizes him.
Thank you, thank you. I just like to, one of the things I like to point out, yeah, I sort of build on what Eric said, is that a technological changes, so I want to give an example. Right now, for, I don't know, a decade or two, they've been building this fusion demonstration reactor in France. I think it's called ETR, I may have that acronym slightly wrong. And it's not going to be done for like another 10 years. And when it gets done, it's still, I'm not sure if it's going to achieve true break even, where the total energy going in is less than the energy coming out, okay? Meanwhile, there are no fewer than 2 private companies in the United States which are pursuing alternatives to the sort of standard tokamak fusion approach. And one of them has a contract with Microsoft to provide commercial power in 2028. Real power, not just some laboratory thing. Now, and they've been using a iterative approach where they started small and they built like 8 or 9 generations of equipment already. So that is something that big companies, in theory, they can do, but they just don't. I mean, innovation is something which wasn't taken into, Marx, I think, was not sufficiently taking into account.
But doesn't most innovation come from small companies?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got the big thing. It's an international collaboration, many billions of dollars, this huge thing, and it may work. I'm not saying it can't work, but meanwhile, you have these smaller companies coming in, and they have a real chance of beating that monster project. And I really don't want to demean the European reactor. It's just that it looks like it may be beat by these smaller companies.
Right.
But there's been editorials from professors at Stanford University, and that's been their argument, that you have these brilliant new, incredibly innovative, rule-breaking companies, and what happens is that they do get swallowed up by Google.
Well, they
Or
can
they
get
do
swallowed
get-
up. Yes.
And that's been a concern from these professors at Stanford University. And you created this company, and I say, hey Joe, I'll pay you $1 billion for
Yeah.
this company, and you go,
But
I
they're
could use a
founded.
break, I could use a vacation.
They're
yeah.
founded. They create a product, and then they might get absorbed.
But that
Myself,
absorption, the professors at Stanford University regret that
Yeah.
absorption, that they
But
don't.
there's a flow though. There's like a life cycle of companies. Because the other thing I'll just mention, thank you letting me throw this one more thing in there. That is that if you look, I would say if you look at like the 10 biggest companies in the world today, and then you go back 50 years and you look at the 10 biggest companies 50 years ago, I think there's going to be like 0 overlap, because you have a situation like IBM. Anybody remember IBM?
Yeah.
It was this
I've heard of it.
huge
Still around.
company.
Anyone
It's still
remember
around.
Intel?
It's
please?
still around, but
But-
tiny little Microsoft basically exploded and became, and you had other companies.
And Intel was in.
Yeah,
Apple
yeah,
is
yeah.
like probably what now eclipsed Microsoft, right?
Oh, yeah, lots. Google.
But that-
Apple.
Oh yeah.
That's
Well,
been
they
a
kind of
concern,
go
having the
back
smaller
and forth, I
companies
think,
just
but
get
they're-
acquired
yeah.
by.
But so there's kind of like a life cycle. Even if you do have companies, they grow, but then they get kind of stagnant and they either break apart or somebody else comes in with a new technology and clobbers
General
them.
Electric was the most on the Dow Jones Industrial
Yeah, there you
Average.
go.
For that to be delisted,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
impossible.
Kodak.
Thank you for
Kodak
letting me
camera.
speak. Sure.
Yeah.
Who invented? They
David, I got-
invented the,
A quick question.
The
digital camera.
You said earlier Marx wrote a book about somebody, what was that book? Or who was the person he was writing about when he wrote a whole book about somebody?
Engels wrote a book attacking Dühring.
Okay. All right, I had that wrong. All right, and then, earlier you said that like Marx, you think that he had good intentions. But isn't there like books and literature and stuff that says that he was like a Satanist and stuff like that? So like, if he was a
right.
Satanist,
Yeah.
Who was a Satanist?
Marx.
Oh,
Now
So
we're
like
doing a
if
conspiracy theory.
if he was a Satanist, so like if he was a Satanist, doesn't that by definition mean he didn't have good intentions?
He thought, if he thought that Satanism was a good thing.
yeah.
He could be wrong, but he
favor
thought.
Satanism?
Yeah.
Marx did?
I very much
Wait a
like
minute,
that
I
statement
thought he
you
was
made,
a
David.
total
That I think
materialist.
almost everybody, virtually everybody, believes that they're doing good things.
Right.
It's just they could be terribly wrong about that
Yes,
belief.
yes. Well,
Else would too.
the thing is that that I've seen some of the discussions on YouTube about Marx being a Satanist, and you have to understand this was when he was very young, when he was juvenile, and it's clear when you listen to Jordan Peterson and other people talking about this, and Michael Knowles has started chiming in on this, and these people are really a bit uninformed, and they don't understand that in the early 19th century, every poet was a Satanist. Satanism
Proto-metal.
was de rigueur. I mean, you had Percy Bysshe Shelley, who wrote quite a number of poems following a satanic. Well, yeah, we could go back before this. You know, at the end of the 17th century, John Milton wrote Paradise Lost, and John Milton was a perfectly sincere Christian, a Puritan. But he was also interested in poetry, and he wanted to write the kind of epic poem that was written by Greeks and Romans in pagan times about the Christian story. So he wrote Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. And one of the things that people noticed when Paradise Lost came out was that, guess who is the most glamorous figure in Paradise Lost?
The heel.
It's Satan.
The
The devil has all the good.
Satan was this very glamorous figure, and a lot of people said this is very unfortunate that Milton has done this, and it's going to lead people astray, and so on and so forth. But then you have a generation or two goes by, and then it becomes really trendy among, and this is with the growth of Romanticism. This becomes part of the Romantic package, is Satanism, and you get it in Shelley. But most of all, or at least most notoriously, and known to absolutely everybody, you get it in Lord Byron. And Lord Byron wrote several satanic works, and it became in sort of artistic circles, it became the current fad, the current craze, and so everybody and his brother was writing satanic works, especially when they were adolescents, and of course ultimately this led to Baudelaire, Les Fleurs du Mal, this entire collection of poems, which is impregnated through and through with Satanism, and the whole idea of evil being deliciously intoxicating, and that you get with Baudelaire, so this is a whole episode in European culture that people like Jordan Peterson don't know about, let's say, and so they think when they find that Marx was just like all these others, that his adolescent poetry has got stuff about Satan worship and so on, and glamorizing Satan and all the rest of it. They think, oh, this is something peculiar to Marx, and and this is Jordan Peterson's idea that evil comes from evil intentions, and so You know, this explains communism. But, you know, this is just, it would have, what would have been remarkable would have been if Marx had been an adolescent poet and not a Satanist. That would have been remarkable.
Could it be those people who like to use Satan or evil? Could they, because they're religious, that gives them the kind of tendency to look at things that way, look at people that way?
Well, I mean, I think that there's,
A paradigm.
I think I think in the arts in Europe, it has long been the case that most people are not very pious. They're not very wholeheartedly devoted to Christianity. You know, I mean, these are people. Very often, these are people who inhabit the cafes on the left bank. You know, and they're not places noted for their pursuit of priestly virtues. They're somewhat the opposite.
Oh, it's kind of counterintuitive.
So it's a counterculture, if you like. That's all. I mean,
But they use the words or the concept of religious concept, but they're opposite.
Yeah, I mean this.
Themselves.
You know, this affected lots of people, and I mean, even I mean, generally speaking, all these things came into the Anglo-Saxon world later than the French world, and so because you know, up until the 1930s, there was a general recognition among all European and European descended societies like the United States. The educated people thought of Paris as being the opinion leader, and the you know, so if you think about all these new arts, painting styles, pointillism and cubism and all those things, they all start in Paris.
Yeah,
And if anybody wants to be up with what's going on, they go to Paris. And so American rich, the sons and daughters of the American rich go to Europe. Sometimes they went to Berlin or Vienna, but more often they went to Paris, and they soak up this atmosphere. You know, in Britain you get things like Aubrey Beardsley. You know, that's a sort of, there's a satanic element there. You get Swinburne, people like that, and they all viewed their leader was Baudelaire, and the Flowers of Evil. What a name for an epoch-making poetry book, The Flowers of Evil.
Didn't France or Paris have that, like a salon culture or something?
Yeah.
Salon, yes. Living room, yeah, salon, living room, yeah. That's what, like, I don't know what, Spanish, it's all, I can see the etymological relationship, certainly with salon or whatever, with living room, yeah.
The other day I went to a talk about Russia. Well, specifically the title was how the West get Russia so wrong for so long. Anyway, the speaker was a former ambassador. He said Putin was evil.
Really?
Oh, well, was that McFall?
No.
It wasn't
Ian
ambassador.
Ian
I mean, McFall is the quintessential ugly American as an ambassador. But who was the ambassador?
Ian Kelly,
Who?
former ambassador to
Who?
Georgia. Ian Kelly. He's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy. Really.
When was he ambassador?
I don't know. Probably early 2000s. I didn't look it up, but he was to Georgia.
Oh, to Georgia.
To Georgia, not Russia.
Oh, not Russia.
Not Russia.
You were a
Well,
Marxist.
I think this is a guy who's affiliated with the Atlantic Council and so forth. You know, neocon all the way.
Globalism, neo-connery,
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, actually, the two are close together. You know, they're not that. I mean, once there might have been globalists here, neocons here, now they're extremely close together, and if anything, the neocons are the dominant group.
So I think the book I have that talks about, I haven't read it, but the book I'm pretty sure I have this book. It's called Marx and Satan by Richard Wurmbrand, and I'm going to read.
Now there's a satanic name.
I'm going to read the Goodreads summary of it. The late Reverend Richard Wurmbrand spent 14 years as a prisoner of the communist government in Romania, where he was persecuted for for his faith in Jesus Christ. His experience led him to spend further years researching Karl Marx and the communist doctrines he developed. While communism portrays itself as a noble endeavor for the good of mankind and claims an atheistic view, Wurmbrand exposes its true roots, revealing that Karl Marx and the fathers of the modern communist socialist movements were inspired by the powers of darkness. By examining the confessions, writings, and poetry of Marx and his followers, the author demonstrates how the Prince of Darkness gave these men the sword by which they have terrorized the nations. Wurmbrand proves that this movement is not simply the work of greedy men hungry for wealth and power, but is after the working of Satan with the intent of destroying mankind.
Wow.
Yeah.
So basically everybody was out to destroy mankind in that.
I don't know that Satan was out to destroy mankind in the Christian.
He didn't start out that way.
But did he want to destroy mankind? I don't know about that.
Probably wanted to just corrupt them so he can harvest their souls.
Right.
You were you were a Marxist, and I assume you were an evangelical one, right? Or well, I mean, in order for you to get new recruits, you have these large volumes. This is just one book of a volume, and you mentioned other Capital. Das Kapital is one of a volume of books, and then you had mentioned other books by Marx, including the Communist Manifesto. Most people don't sit down and read thousands of pages and study them.
True.
Most Christians don't read the Bible. Try not to be shocked. And so you really had to have had a good pamphleteer or somebody who knew how to synthesize or make a quick, small synopsis, because your average person isn't going to read 5 volumes of book, isn't going to sit down and read thousands of pages.
So what point are you making?
I guess when you guys had brochures or to convey what Karl Marx meant or what Karl Marx said, I know that you said there was chapter 32. Maybe just turn that one chapter into a single pamphlet, or...
Well, it's only 3 pages, and you don't need the first page, so I would say it's not even a pamphlet.
When you were a Marxist, you had somebody who was very good at making little synopsises or writing to the point. You didn't expect the average person or the average recruit to read thousands of pages? Or...
Well, I mean, reading thousands of pages is something that I did from choice over a long period. I mean, but no, I met people who said they were socialists, and I said, "Oh, what does that mean?" And they told me their particular, and it was a Marxist version of socialism, and they had some good arguments, and or I thought they were good at the time, and so I eventually joined them. But I mean, I started reading Marx simultaneously with this. But I started with the preconception that Marx was the originator of this particular kind of socialism, and that I would learn a lot if I read Marx.
Well, what's interesting, it sounds like from your summary of Marx said this was just what happened, that it was inevitable.
Right.
But did he advocate, trying to push it along, or was it just, it'll just happen, guys, you don't have to do anything?
Oh no, he thought you had to do something, but that's a kind of paradox, that it's inevitable, it's going to happen, but we want to make it happen.
Okay.
So I don't think it's exactly contradictory, but it certainly it does raise questions.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's contradictory, but you don't, if it's gonna happen, you can just say, well, just sit here and eventually it'll happen, you know?
I think my question was in terms of marketing. So I have this new religion. I want you all to join and be saved by my new religion. And you said, Karina, what's your new religion? I said, well, here, you have to read this. Read
Right,
this
right, yeah.
3,000 page.
I know the whole pattern, yeah.
And then you go, could you give me a Cliff Notes? Or, I mean, you know, that whole type of thing. So, but then what you did is you met people who were socialists, but they were really, and then you asked what it was, and that's what got, when just by normal conversation. But
There must have been meetings and rallies and stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
most people aren't going to sit down and read.
Yeah.
right, no, I mean, I don't see what your problem is. I mean, there was no demand that everybody read the entire works of Marx, or even read any Marx. But these ideas were bandied about in conversation, and they sounded very persuasive to me.
So you guys had like a Nicene Creed or an Apostles'
Yeah,
Creed?
well, actually, yeah. The organisation that I ended up joining in 1963, I think, had a declaration of principles that you had to agree to.
Interesting.
What was the organization?
Socialist Party of Great Britain. And so this is why I'm interested now in belief systems in general. And one of my theories is that all belief systems, all organized belief systems tend to develop a scripture and a creed. And they may call it something different, like we called our creed the Declaration of Principles. Right? It was 8 principles, and we had to agree with all of them. And one of the things that I observed, and I have observed in many belief systems, is that there is a statement, an official statement of what you have to believe, but there are other things you have to believe that are not in the official statement. That's always true, nearly always true. You know,
It's a bit like a business. Businesses have that too,
yeah.
How many,
core values.
you're a Marxist, how many of your fellow Marxists do you think read all of Das Kapital?
Marxists.
Marxists.
I knew a number of people who made a point of reading Capital, but a lot of them didn't. I mean, but you see, Marx wrote short, accessible works as well.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there is the Communist Manifesto, although I think the Communist Manifesto is a bit misleading in some ways. But Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, I think a great many people, thousands of people have read that who would never...
And you said that was 100 pages, you said?
About 100, I'm guessing, yeah. Yeah. It's a short pamphlet. Short in these...
I'm trying to promote something and it requires an enormous erudite approach. Well, this won't, so you'll have to have some sort of, you know, quick elevator pitch or
Yeah. I mean, another of my, if I ever do write my general theory of belief systems, one of my principles is that nobody understands the whole belief system, but they think there are other members of the organization who do. And then eventually they may learn that even those members don't understand it all. So that's a common predicament. So there were things I didn't understand about Marxism, but I thought there were people in the party who did. And I tried to, being the kind of person I am, I tried to read up on it myself and figure it out. I mean, one of my conclusions about Marxism is that it's much less tightly woven than people think. By that I mean that there are different bits of the doctrine that don't necessitate other bits. A simple example would be, if you're a Marxist, if you call yourself a Marxist, this means that you believe in something called historical materialism. Historical materialism is a theory that the basis of society is what Marx called the relations of production. And Marx has a picture of a typical way in which social change takes place, which is there are changes in the forces of production, in other words, technology, and they disrupt the relations of production. And then eventually the relations of production are brought into harmony with the forces of production. And when I was a Marxist, I just accepted that this was part of Marxism. But now I think historical materialism doesn't imply the rest of Marxism at all. You could be a historical materialist and be pro-capitalist, because you would have a different... When Marx came to write Capital, he makes all these arguments for why it's inevitable that capitalism will turn into communism. He doesn't say because of historical materialism. He has very specific arguments, like the idea that business enterprises are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger without limit. Or the only limit is one big firm owning everything. That is a claim about the way things happen in capitalism. It's not derivable from historical materialism. You could believe it without believing in historical materialism, or you could believe in historical materialism and not believe that about capitalist competition. They're just separate. But when I was really into all this, I certainly exaggerated in my mind the way it all hung together. And it was all new to me, historical materialism.
What is that?
It's the theory that social change takes place because changes in the forces of production come into conflict with the relations of production, and that brings about an adjustment of the relations of production to fit the new forces of production.
Relations of production?
Relations of production. That means
Makes sense.
the basic economic relations.
Makes
like
sense to me.
Property law and stuff like that.
I had another question. I know very little of Marx, so if this is a basic question, then that's why. Did Marx have any ideas about innate differences between groups of people? Because if he's talking about, we would just abolish the classes, I think if there are innate differences between groups of people, then classes are inevitable. So you would never be able to get rid of the classes.
Well,
they would always reassert themselves in some way.
You see, Marx has a special definition of class, and there may be other ways in which groups of humans are differentiated from each other, but they wouldn't count as classes. So in Marx's definition of class, it's because of your position in the relations of production. So if you're a wage worker working for a capitalist, you might be a Roman Catholic, or you might be a Protestant, or you might be a Muslim, or you might be an atheist. Those
that
are
doesn't matter
differences.
as much as you're a wage worker or a proletariat person.
But, yeah, so those are all differences, and Marx wouldn't deny they exist. But he would say if you're looking at economic change in the long run, you look at people as members of economic classes.
Okay, fine, but I guess what I'm saying is, if there are, let's say, innate differences, like even, it doesn't even have to be, between different distinct groups of people. It can just be anybody. there's going to be variations in talent and IQ and ambition and all this kind of stuff, such that they will sort themselves on those based on those factors into, well, this person's only going to become a wage worker, and this person, they're headed somewhere, because they've got the drive and the IQ and the, whatever. And so their innate talents, abilities, or whatever, they will sort themselves into classes like that. So when he's talking about abolishing the class system, how does that comport with, those innate differences? Wouldn't those classes just reassert themselves?
I think Marx would have accepted, and did accept, I think, that given that you've got a society which has capitalists and workers, you will sometimes get workers who, because of unusual ability, become capitalists. He wouldn't have any trouble with accepting that. Similarly, you might get capitalists who spend all their time drinking and womanizing or whatever, and descend into the proletariat. So that would be taken for granted. That can happen, but you've still got this basic economic structure where some people own property, other people work for them and don't own much property. Now, Marx does have this false view, I think, that you see, he has this false view that the workers are going to get worse off all the time. And exactly, there is a little bit of wriggle room there, that there are times when you can think you can interpret him as saying they're only becoming relatively worse off and so on. But most of the time, for instance, he always refers to wages as subsistence. And then there will occasionally be a remark acknowledging that they might be more than subsistence. But you still have this Marx believed that wages were determined by subsistence, and he puts this forward again and again and again. Now, he allows himself some imprecision in it's not necessarily strict biological subsistence. There's a kind of conventional element that it's what you expect. A lot of Marx's ideas in economics are just carried over from other economists. Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and people like that. Marx coined the term classical economics. He came up with that term. But he didn't use it in exactly the same way that other people have used it since. And one of them is that when he distinguishes between classical economists and vulgar economists. And by vulgar economists, he means people like John Stuart Mill. And by classical economists, he means people like Smith and Ricardo. And the distinction is that the classical economists believe in the labour theory of value. And the people who don't believe in the labour theory of value, like J.S. Mill, Marx says they're vulgar, although he does say he's unusually accomplished for a vulgar economist. Because in Marx's time, J.S. Mill kept on doing new editions of his treatise on political economy, like every few years, updating it and everything. And this more or less spans the time when Marx was actively working on economics. And so there are many sort of similarities between their outlook, just because Marx was trying to do a critique of political economy.
Weren't you with Capital written?
When?
Yeah.
Well, the first volume is the only volume that was published in Marx's lifetime, and it was published in 1867. He on the rest of his idea was for a big 4-volume work, and the 4th volume would be a critical examination of previous economic theories, whereas the first 3 volumes would be his own economic theory. Usually today they call the 4th volume Theories of Surplus Value because it's been published under that title, and many people don't know that it was intended to be the 4th volume of Capital. But he did a lot of work on volumes 2, 3, and 4, and after his death, Engels, actually after his death, volumes 2 and 3, Engels brought them out from Marx's notes, although notes is a bit misleading. He wrote long passages, which were to have. I mean, that's the way that Marx, like a lot of people in the 19th century, when they were trying to write a great work, they would write long passages, and then later they'd amend these slightly and incorporate them into something different.
I was trying to get back to Eric. So it's Germany and it's 1860.
Jill brought it.
Right. So Eric was trying to show some empathy or look through his perspective. So he's German, right? He's living in Germany.
Who?
Karl Marx.
Yeah.
He's living in Germany. It's 1860.
No, he's in London by then.
Yeah, later
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, he
Was he
lived
kicked
in.
out of Germany, or did he go on his
Well,
own?
what happened was he moved to Paris, and then he was expelled from Paris by the government, from France by the government,
What?
and then he went to London, and that was about 1850, and then he had decided he was going to write this great work on political economy, and so that's what he set out to do. Now he himself.
But this is so just step back. This is during the Industrial Revolution, right?
Well, the Industrial Revolution
Was in
had
1700.
already happened, because that was the 18th century, really.
Yeah, okay, it was a 17. So, but at this point, then you have, I guess you still have yeoman farmers, but you also have people who are cogs in the machinery at factories, and the factories are creating textiles.
Yeah, I mean, Britain was by far the most advanced in terms of modern industry, far more advanced than most parts of Europe.
And they had textile mills, which
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the Industrial Revolution was all about that.
Right. And
Textile- and was there
Engels,
steel yet, or the Bessemer process for steel is when?
Engels was a close friend of Marx, and Engels inherited a half share in a textile works near Manchester,
Okay.
and so before Engels came into his inheritance, Marx was basically poor. Before Engels came into his inheritance, he helped Marx out a bit. Then when he came into his inheritance, he settled a very generous allowance on Marx, on the understanding that Marx would write these great works, especially the great work Capital. As I like to say, the workers in Salford, which is the suburb of Manchester, were being exploited for their own good. So that's a joke among
Right,
Marxists.
so we're in England though, and there's lots of factories, and
Yeah.
people have, there's
But
been
not-
this
but, yeah.
urbanization, so people work in the cities and they
Yeah.
work for factories, and instead of being their own proprietary farmers or,
Yeah, in the mid 19th century.
I'm thinking Charles Dickens-ish.
Right, but yeah, that's London. In the mid 19th century, Manchester was the future. Just like when I was thinking about things in the 1960s, California was the future, right? In the mid 19th century and the early 19th century, Manchester was the future. Like it or hate it. And so in Germany, there was this idea that the English are money grubbing and we're noble. And so they talked about Manchester Tum, right, which is like our TUM, which is like our ending Dom, right, Christendom and that sort of thing. So they talked about Manchester Tum and the domination of everything by these filthy factories.
At this point, we don't have cars yet.
Right.
It would be 1900s where you see the very beginning of the automobile.
Right. Well, I
industry.
think they did build a few of them in the 19th century, but not for mass consumption.
So we don't have that assembly line yet.
Every city had
That's
lots and
1920.
lots
Henry
of
Ford.
horses
That's 20th century.
Yeah.
and lots of horse manure on the streets.
I was just
So
gonna
you might
ask,
have cholera at this. You might have cholera.
Yeah, I don't recall any cholera in London at that time, but you've
There
had
was
all
in
kinds
Chicago.
of infectious, scarlet fever, all kinds of infectious diseases.
So you are in the Dickinson.
Yeah, Dickensian period, yeah.
You didn't pay your bills. I'm putting you in the poorhouse, and I'm putting your kids in the poorhouse.
Right. Yeah, those are the days.
the word
Those
house.
were the days.
And I guess Jack the Ripper is running
Why
around
was
killing
Marx thrown out of
prostitutes.
France?
Because for
Would you ask
revolutionary
themselves?
Because he
activity.
was Marx.
I mean, I suppose the silver lining to all
Before
the
the
infectious
assembly
diseases is that the people who are not affected by the infectious diseases are healthier, and so, you know,
Natural
selection pressure, yeah.
Natural selection.
Chicago had cholera, very severe, with the horses shitting everywhere into ultimately Lake Michigan, and
Until
But
they
then-
reversed the flow of the Chicago River, right?
right. But then also now we don't have horses; we have
Yeah.
automobiles, you know. And then we did have lead poisoning, but then we took lead
Well-
out of the gasoline.
I mean, in San Francisco, they have guys doing, you know, what the horses used to do in Chicago.
Okay. Maybe you can turn that into some.
You're a
type of
drug
book,
addict
right?
and you're shitting on the sidewalk, is what he said. But
Hey, I think I got that, yeah.
I don't,
Well-
yeah, so it is hard for me to emphasize or
But you don't get any work
empathize
out of the drug
with
addicts.
Karl Marx. It is hard for me to see things
It's hard. It's not a
from
usual
his
human
perspective.
being. He wasn't a usual.
I'm sure that there were many children who died before they reached the age of 5 because you just said scarlet fever and you have measles, mumps, rubella. So you didn't have an enormous vaccine. You know, the first vaccine wasn't at smallpox, right? And so you don't have the vaccine, so you have a.
This has been a good, I'm really glad you gave this presentation because I wasn't really aware or very clearly aware that Marx thought it was inevitable, that it was just a natural evolution. I mean, let's face it, revolution certainly is a big thing about Marxism historically.
Right.
But he thought it was natural, not going to happen naturally, and yeah, you could make it come faster, maybe with a revolution, but it was we've disproven his theory basically, I think pretty soundly.
And
Yeah,
what we see now is that even when there is a leader, Uber, you'll have another Lyft on the side.
Yeah.
That we have
yeah.
these kind of duopolies.
Or it'll be self-driving cars. Well, you know.
Or you got
get
Netflix
rid of all the
buying
drivers.
Time Warner or
Like
Warner.
China has so many
Discovery,
different
whatever
car companies, but
Yeah.
they are gonna eventually all either die
Maybe,
off
maybe
or
not. I
conglomerate to become an oligopoly. But there won't be one
No.
one single electric company in
yeah.
China. You'll still the people will want to be able to at least have the illusion of choice. You know,
Even
No, it's
even
not
if they
illusion.
don't want
It
the
started with
choice,
50.
they'll be different.
Then now it's probably a dozen. Well, in
Companies.
phone companies, they made electric cars.
Yeah.
So it's not like a eventually end up to
Right.
one or two. No, it's
That-
just it's settled in a certain level, and until the market totally changes, until the technology changes, then we have a different equilibrium.
Yeah, excellent example
but you do
though.
have
It
a
used
glut
to be
right now. You have
used
too
to be
many
one
cars.
phone company basically
Depends
in
on
the
how you look at
U.S.
it.
and
You
then it was
export.
broken apart by the government.
Apple makes too many
And now
phones, and they
It's
export.
not back into one, but now we've kind of got a different organization
right.
with the cell phone companies basically.
Yeah, all
But
the-
you have Verizon and you have T-Mobile.
Yeah.
You don't only
But
have Verizon.
it was one big company, and then it was forcibly broken apart.
Yeah,
Into
that's
a million
different.
baby
And
bells.
Yeah, and then now it's kind of recoalesced in a different way.
But it didn't
You know.
recoalesce into one company.
No, not
It
one. Not
you
one.
have the
Yeah.
T-Mobile and you have the Verizon. And then, and you have AT&T, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
you don't,
Yeah, I went to Beijing last year, went to Shanghai this year. Both cities, and as well as in Vienna, you have the same block, one end of the block, Apple store, the other end of the block, Huawei store.
Mhm.
And those two, that's both, I've been to, Vienna, Beijing, Shanghai. But in Beijing and Shanghai, you go to Apple store, there's no car, but you go to Huawei store, there are cars.
They have
You know, they have SUV, they have sedan. Of
Oh,
course,
they
they have
sell cars, you mean?
tablet, they have
I see.
cell phone, and they have cars.
They sell cars as well.
Yeah,
as
they have
computers.
cars. Huawei recently came up with the microchip, the high-end semiconductor that's comparable to the high-end of NVIDIA. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a different thing.
you
So
dominate
you
the
have,
market so much that I get sick of it, so then like Nvidia's so massive, no way, we can't pay these huge prices, we'll make our own chips, maybe
No,
we'll have to
they
wait
was-
5 years.
they were not
Amazon's
exported.
making their own.
Yeah, they couldn't
They
buy
were
them.
banned.
They were
They were banned.
export
They were
regulations.
banned.
Yeah, go ahead.
They were banned, like in Biden administration. Well, first Trump administration tried to ban it.
Yeah.
But somehow he kind of reconciled. They talked to him. They said, "Okay, I'm not gonna do that to you."
Taco, Trump always chickens out.
No, that was the first administration. That was not escalated to the level that it is right now. Then the second, then I think it was banned during Biden administration. Total, the highest end was banned.
If you guys
But
want
the
to do it,
second layer,
other people wanna
let's
keep
say
it going,
H100 was
I
banned.
would recognize
H20
that as
was
continuation.
allowed.
But for me
But
personally,
then-
to like continue it,
But then Trump came along. He also wanted to ban H20.
I
And then Taco happened. He said, "Okay, we'll let you have H20." The Chinese says, "Right, no, we don't want it anymore." Because number one, they
We
probably
have
they
our
have
own engineers,
H20
you know that?
second layer, right? Second tier, and they had their own comparable, but they
We know how
still
to
didn't.
reverse engineer,
but they
I'll build
still-
it myself.
Not necessarily reverse engineer. They just have some figure out, you know.
What
But
are those
they still
individual
didn't
things you're
have-
talking about?
Huh?
What are those individual?
Graphics
things?
processors.
Like the graphical processors, those are processors for AI, machine, supercomputer, training AI, doing machine learning, that kind of stuff. So those are key.
Why did
But-
Biden ban them?
But they just continue the trade war, embargo kind of thing, continue into Biden administration. So then in Trump administration, because the CEO of NVIDIA was Trump was so buddy, he persuaded him to open H20, but not H100. But well, there's another detail. During Biden administration, you heard about this DeepSeek moment. That's when H20, the second tier, is still allowed. So Chinese were able to figure out how to use the second tier to build a top tier model that rivals ChatGPT. So that's why it shook the market. That's why NVIDIA, when it was pushed out on Monday, or announced on Monday, NVIDIA's lost $1 trillion of market value. Because people figure, oh, we don't need a top line processor anymore. We don't need to buy NVIDIA, the best product from NVIDIA anymore. So NVIDIA's lost the price dropped. They lost $1 trillion
Also
market
him-
value in one day.
Yeah.
And and you know what? How the Chinese do that? They use two different models, and they also use some kind of end results out of the ChatGPT doing their training their thing. So they do everything, and they bundle. They say, okay, we don't get H100, but they figure out how to bundle like 100 H20 to be one H100. Because at the time H20 is still allowed. But Trump came along, he banned H20. So now China said, oh, well. But in the meantime, in those 2 years, even since Trump's first administration, Chinese was like, we cannot rely on Americans anymore. We gotta have our own thing. That's why
Well, I
Huawei.
think the justification is military usage.
Yeah, justification always.
That's where the regulation
National
comes from.
security.
I don't know whether it should. I'm not arguing whether it should be done or not. I'm just saying
Yeah,
that's the
what happened.
rationale for it.
Yeah,
But among American huge giants, Amazon, which has enough capital to do new things and potentially fail, that can happen. Who cares? You know, we have enough money. Amazon is starting to make their own chips too. Will it be as successful as AWS or not? I can't tell you, but they have
Tesla's
enough.
talking about
They can
making their own
afford to
chips.
try to do that.
Yeah, there's several companies in China doing that. But
Which
Huawei
is
the
which
most
is again,
leading.
it fits into the Marx discussion.
Yeah,
I mean, the idea is why isn't there just one company making the chips? Well, we do have NVIDIA, which is very big, but other companies are coming up.
There are other
They
companies.
want to get a piece of the market.
But my whole argument tonight
And they're
is you
different
have NVIDIA,
specialized.
but you
Yeah.
also have AMD. So AMD.
AMD, yeah. It's not like they're not
You have a
comparable.
younger brother, You have a younger brother. You have Coke. You have Pepsi. You have Uber. You have Lyft.
Yeah.
You have NVIDIA. You have AMD. You have BYD, and then you have Neo, which might die off. I don't know, but
And what happened to Intel?
Well, they're hanging
Intel,
in there, but
U.S.
they're,
government, federal government has 10% of their shares
Yeah, they just ran into
because
some
they try to
trouble, I don't
rescue
know.
them. Yeah, they're not doing very well.
Yeah.
when you make a fab that's enormously capital intensive, and that requires a lot of money up front,
A huge
and you
amount, yeah.
don't just make a fab over a weekend. That's an enormous, massive.
Oh yeah, they're different.
And so right now you make semiconductor chips in Taiwan, which has a vulnerability. So
Yeah, that's right.
the whole CHIPS Act under Biden is let's have our own fab, which is like a
Well,
factory.
they got Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company to build a plant in Arizona, which I
That's
think
Trump.
is coming
That's
along
Trump
okay.
doing
It's
it.
not
He
done
said
yet.
coming
Yeah,
along.
coming along
You didn't
okay.
snap your fingers and have the factory.
Yeah, no, it
here.
takes years.
Coming along okay.
And so Intel was also along that line of actually, you're really sexy when you do the design and stuff, but once you actually start doing the capital expenses, I don't know if I want to buy your company because I have to,
It's a huge amount of money.
that's much more to actually hold the capital equipment. You just don't, the people look down on that because your equipment depreciates. Whereas when I have my intellectual property or my design, I don't have this issue, but to actually own the means of production is almost a downer, and owning fabs is an enormous capital output.
Yeah, capital,
So,
human capital as well. So the
and
West,
also they did fall behind the times. Intel just kept making laptop central processing units. And how long have you had your computer? And how often do you change your computer?
Well,
Which you basically use to connect to the internet.
we do
I mean,
change it occasionally.
the microprocessor, the supply chain was.
every year, every 5 years, every 10.
I have a computer for since 2008. I'm still using.
So
Pretty
so
slow.
we're not
That's
having-
roughly
you don't bu-
how old my.
No,
my
not this
computer
one.
is,
This
yeah.
one I bought it last year.
So you're not
this
always
year.
buying a new
Oh,
computer.
well,
and this,
you can't. Don't claim you had 2008. You're using that one now.
Yeah, but that one because a big screen, a touch screen.
so
I
how
kind of
many
use it
computer
for.
chips do we need for your CPU?
I use for. When I want to watch a movie, I use it. When I
Touch-
watch a concert, I
Touch
use it.
screen takes on a whole new meaning in that
with
context,
your
man.
No,
computer,
the big
you don't
screen,
have
the
as
size
playable
matters.
as much.
Gotta
The
zoom in. Gotta zoom in.
I have a story.
semiconductor.
Anybody?
Oh,
Okay,
Go ahead.
I have to leave in a few minutes. Let
Yeah.
me just tell you my quick sob story.
Oh.
So, I inherited some money from my mother a couple years
So
ago.
far, it doesn't sound
When
like
you bought
much
a
of a
TV.
sub-story.
Well,
yeah,
and,
that's
and
right.
I decided I want to use this inheritance for something special.
Me.
So, well, you could qualify. Okay. Anyway, so I put it in the bank, and I took a couple $1,000s out, and I bought an 83-inch optical LED.
Oh, yeah, I remember
Organic
you saying.
LED.
Yeah, I remember you saying.
It's a beautiful, beautiful TV.
83 inches?
83 inches.
And how much did that set you back? A few grand?
$2,400, I think. Okay, now here's the thing.
84 inches.
So I had it for like less than a year, and my parrot, it's on its stand. It's kind of like, imagine it's like
no.
this, okay? And I have a parrot, and I have a portable stand. It rolls around, and it ended up getting close enough that he was able to step off of the stand where the TV was. And I'm in the living room, and I hear click. And I go over and I look, and there he is. He's in front of the TV. And I pick him up and put him back on the stand and roll it away. And I look at the TV, and I don't see anything. It looks fine. The next day, I turn on the TV, and there's a colored stripe down the screen. Wait, but it's worse than that. That's bad enough. It won't start up. It displays Web OS or something like that, where it's trying to start up, and then it stops.
Did you buy a warranty?
Yes,
pack the
it's
screen
not
or
covered
something?
by the warranty. The warranty guy comes out, and he takes his
Bird beak
flashlight,
damage, I imagine,
his
is not covered.
flashlight, and he looks carefully along. He says,
They know what to
"Yep,
look for."
there's a problem." He didn't know who did it, what did it, but he said, "I'm responsible because it got damaged."
Physical damage, yeah.
And so my parrot. What can I say? I love my parrot.
You put it to pasture.
No, what?
I said you put your parrot to pasture.
No, I can't.
I
do
bet
that.
he tasted.
not bringing
I bet he
carrot
tasted
cake
like
to
chicken.
me?
I love my parrot, but there was one click and
Yeah, I love the
Can
taste.
how
Love the
much would
taste.
it be for you to repair it?
Oh,
I
it's not
won't-
worth
I
repairing.
won't
You probably can't repair that.
repair
Yeah, it's not
it.
gonna
You
be the
can. They
same.
have to replace the whole screen,
Yeah.
and replacing the screen is
Yeah, yeah.
effectively a new
Buy a
technology.
new one, new
Yes.
technology, newer technology.
So look, I'm okay. I don't want.
Do you have a cat?
The point is, it's like one little minute of this little guy, and click with his beak, and there it goes.
Yeah.
So now,
Parrots
I'll
are-
put you on the list of people that might be
that
a
is
good
special.
thing to
Nice.
spend money on, but I'm not promising
How do you
anything.
dispose
Alright.
of a broken 82-inch TV?
What about it?
$129.
That's actually the question that I need answered.
Um,
I'm gonna ask
we,
ChatGPT. What?
we recently got, those things are not to be thrown in a garbage dump.
No, I know.
So
I know.
we recently used a service.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because we have two toilet bowls with tanks, of course. Not supposed to go into garbage dump too. My wife found this place. Actually, our neighbors use that too. They will come and pick it up.
Do you remember the name?
I can tell you later. My wife.
That would be great. If
That
you
they
could-
have $129 minimum charge.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. So they $129. They will take it.
Because I don't know what to do.
I'll
And,
do it. Wait a minute. I'll do it for $100.
That's okay. I mean, it's not my business.
I'll do
Here
it
we
for
go.
$100.
Anybody?
work.
Do I
Because-
hear another bid?
Because where I
I do it
live,
$20
Oh,
for
what?
$20.
You
I
have
live
a
in
place?
Des Plaines,
Yeah.
and on Wednesdays they have free electronic recycling.
Really?
So it's free
will
for
they
me.
wait? Will they pick it up from your house? No, you have to. Bring
Yeah, they pick it
right?
up.
Yeah,
They pick it up.
bring it. So I could
Okay.
be, and the reason why you pay me is because I could pick it up from your house.
Yes. Okay. Well, I will. If you are serious about that,
I am
offer,
serious about that.
I don't know that. How are you gonna transport it though? It's pretty big.
I can procure a vehicle
There's a
that does
question
that.
with rare earths.
Okay.
whether you
Well,
can
listen. I'll keep
recycle
you in mind.
more of your electronic
I've got your
crap
email.
You
and
do have
get
my
some more
email.
rare earths.
Like, I'm
just
not
from
joking, like, if
recycling
it's a
as opposed
difference
to
between
Yeah,
digging
there's a
up
factory.
companies.
There's a
Yeah,
firm.
yeah.
There's a firm
And,
in
like,
the US does that.
This guy right here,
Yeah.
who's, like,
Okay.
I
come
wasn't-
on, bro.
It's
Well,
just
You're
like,
serious.
human
I am
time
serious.
span
I am
is
not
just
joking
day.
at
People
all.
just-
Okay.
The
okay.
fact that I have free
Most people are
electronic
not like David,
recycling,
and they just
In
don't
my
sit down
thing,
and
because
read tomes.
I can make some money
If you
and
come-
save you money.
If you come by to
Right,
pick it
people
up,
just watch
you
the
have to
video,
be
they think
prepared,
they know
though.
the whole thing.
That's fair.
But
right
to
right
do
there.
the deep digging
That's
into,
fair.
you know.
I will, and then I'll give him a
Yeah,
little high
it's
five
always-
to be like, hey, good job.
I think that
Okay.
you
Just
should
made me
really
some money.
understand it, you need to read the real thing. Instead of
But
someone,
your average
someone,
show isn't going to put
then
in
screw them. Well, who
that,
cares?
well,
Alright.
if you're trying to
It's
be
your choice.
evangelical or you're trying to create
Oh, I see,
a
I see.
movement, so
Right,
I'm
that's
trying
fine.
to create
Well, thank you for
Koreanism,
that
and I'm
fancy
trying to get
treats.
everybody
Yeah.
to
Well, I
read
was so
Koreanist.
happy that I
Right.
had
But
something
not
to
everybody's
bring.
gonna read
I
my
always think, what can I bring?
5,000
What can I bring?
page
Ah, I'm
Right.
gonna bring the
Korean
Bible.
thing.
Well,
you know,
then you,
Okay.
if you want to specialize
Alright.
in that area.
Well, on that note,
Joe,
thank you
I
very
have
much for
an
the
event
visit.
tomorrow. The
Tomorrow?
library, yeah, the library you've been to.
Yeah?
The
What
title
time?
is the future of globalization
What,
and what's it called? Deep seek moment.
what time is
I'll
it?
tell you why it's a deep seek moment.
Okay, why?
1:30. Why? Because we have a new, cheaper way of accomplish good thing. Just
Yeah.
like DeepSeek had cheaper way to accomplish what ChatGPT can accomplish. So you'll find out tomorrow how we accomplish that to make them more lively. And the topic is the future of globalism.
Well, unfortunately,
Globalization, not globalism.
you're going to think that I'm doing this on purpose, but I'm not. Tomorrow is the 8th lecture in the University of Chicago lectures I've been going to, and after the lecture,
Okay.
they're having a luncheon.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, that's fine. Oh well,
I'm
we
really
started
sorry.
too. So if you can make it,
you
I
said
mean,
1:30.
1:30 is when I go in, but I have to set up things. But usually takes me 30 minutes to come to start.
Okay, so
But you can be late. Doesn't matter. We have until
Did you get my
4:30.
invitation?
okay. Well,
Yeah.
listen.
You may
It
find
would
it-
be on the
Just
way
at this
home
meeting.
from the
I haven't
the
looked at mine
lecture.
yet.
So the
Yeah,
luncheon. So
You know how
okay,
easy to
so
park over there.
I'm,
It's very easy.
I'm putting it. It's the same place.
Same place.
Yeah. Okay. Hang
Wait,
on.
Vic,
What's
you're
the
not
University
giving
of
him
Chicago
your
lecture?
information if he wants to arrange with you.
He's got my email.
I've got his email. Yeah.
One last question for you. Are there currently Marxists today? Or is this a dead movement? Or are there currently, do you believe, a whisper or a hanger-on of Marxists today?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of Marxists today.
Are they real Marxists?
Yeah,
That's the question.
Right, there are different breeds. I
mean,
can
there's
share
di-
some
there's all
experience.
kinds of different. I mean,
Okay, it's in my phone.
Great.
Oh.
Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. Hermione will be there
University of Chicago?
if that's any draw.
So you think there's a
They
lot of
have,
Marxists today?
yeah,
In the spring and in the fall,
I think that
each year so far, they have a series of 8 lectures called the Compton Lectures.
I think there's a
Go
lot
to
of
Google and
people
type
who
in
are
Compton.
influenced by
Come right up, probably.
neo-Marxism,
Each time it's a different
which is the same
subject.
thing as cultural
And
Marxism
8
or
lectures.
Western Marxism.
The
That,
ones
they all
in
mean
the
roughly
fall-
the same
Tomorrow
thing.
was the last one. in the
And these
series.
are
It's on.
people who are influenced by the
It's on
Frankfurt School.
environmental.
The most
climate,
influential one now is
engineering.
Herbert
It's
Marcuse.
about engineering
Um,
approaches to
If you look
reducing
on,
the effects
if you look at the sales of his
of climate
books
change.
on
Two
Amazon,
main ones, basically.
sells quite a lot of books every week.
Extracting carbon
every day.
dioxide from the atmosphere and storing
So
it
he's an
somewhere.
influential version of Marxism.
Who's this?
Makuza.
Oh, Herbert I heard him lecture
Reduce
once.
the amount of solar
Um,
radiation that reaches the earth.
So that's one, and then
they both are possible ways that we can
the big turning point
engineer
in
to
Marxism was
reduce any effects of climate
1919 when the
change.
Third
And,
International
fascinating. These are
was
people,
formed,
these are
which meant
professors
that
who are writing
there were all these
papers, who are
communist parties in
plugged
every
you
country
know,
that
one
were
guy
loyal
was
to
involved in
Moscow and had to be
startup
loyal to
companies,
Moscow.
techniques,
Um,
and so on.
And
And,
then there were people, all kinds of different people who
Best intentions, you know.
Well, I know, but listen, the engineering
didn't
is
want
the
to
thing.
be part of that
And,
Third
there
International.
are,
And so they would be the Frankfurt School,
there's
they
good
would be
argument why
followers of
it would be
Antonio
good to
Gramsci.
either stop.
So, you
we're
know,
not
there's a
gonna
lot of
stop
different,
dumping carbon
and
dioxide
basically
in the
there's a
atmosphere.
great similarity.
Then you have
If
two-
looked at from a
You have
distance,
3 choices.
there's a great
You
similarity.
either pull it
They
back
all
out and store it, you reduce solar radiation
accept a lot
so
of,
that reduces the
they
effect,
usually accept
or
Marxian
you adapt.
economics.
and adaptation
So they
would
accept
be
the
like
economics
moving
of
away from the
capital.
coast, building seawalls,
Yeah.
you know, things like that, okay?
They usually,
And,
what
it's
happened
a
with
really, actually, they are
the
available.
cultural
the
Marxists is
the
that
videos are available online.
they had to come up with a theory for why it
But
hadn't
it's
happened.
doing
Why we
something.
haven't got communism, right?
And,
So,
you can measure the
and
effects,
generally
but
speaking, there's all kinds of different theories, but generally speaking,
actually,
they tend
a
towards
very
the
modest number of planes
idea that,
would make a measurable effect. And it
see, the
would be-
problem is, why haven't the working
By the way,
class
Neil
become
Stephenson, I
revolutionary?
don't know if you're familiar with him, he's a science
Right.
fiction author. He wrote a book called
And,
Information Shock.
I think the answer's clear
about
because
it's like 20,
the-
30
the
or
working class are too
20, 40 or
smart.
something, maybe 20, 40
You know,
or
they-
something. And temperatures
what's in it
gone
for
up
them?
in this,
You know,
I
you
think
get
it's like a wealthy
you could go for a
industrialist
revolution,
has
you get
built
something
this
like the
system
Soviet
for
Union,
shooting
where
canisters
as a worker you're worse
of
off than you would be in the
sulfur
rest.
compounds
Okay.
into the stratosphere in order to
But
reduce the effects.
Marxists, a lot of these
Because it
Marxists
wasn't
don't
being
think like
done,
that.
and he said,
But then there
I
are,
gotta do something, I'm just gonna do it,
Sounds
you
like
know?
Elon
I mean, I think there are
Yeah, it's kinda
people who accept that it wasn't a good deal for the workers
Yeah,
to
no,
become
I love
to become
those
revolutionary.
lectures. It's
So they have to go
a
into
nice thing.
um,
All right,
how has
Good night now.
capitalism managed to defend
Bye-bye.
itself?
Bye.
Take it easy, Joe.
And usually it would be by some kind of cultural change.
Okay.
You know, but there are lots of different views. Of course, at any moment, you've always got people going back to some earlier version of Marxism. So you get waves of Trotskyism. Because Trotsky was, fell out with Stalin and
Yeah,
was
okay.
exiled. So
Matt Frida Kahlo,
but
they
then,
tried to assassinate him,
from my point of view, I was never involved in that kind of thinking, because Trotsky was instrumental in setting up the regime, and it was basically an anti-democratic regime which did a lot of harm. So, when I was a Marxist,
Not that Stalin was particularly a benevolent guy either.
no, right, no, he was not. But Trotsky wouldn't have been necessarily any better.
Trotsky
yeah.
was the military arm of the Bolshevik Revolution,
Yeah,
and the Lenin was the political arm.
yeah,
And then-
Trotsky crushed the Kronstadt rebellion.
Right, exactly.
Some Russian sailors who rebelled against the new government, and Trotsky was the one who
The
crushed
Stalin,
them, you know.
what's it called? Petrograd. That's St. Petersburg, right?
Well,
Sailor,
I've
right?
known it as
Gotta
the
be a St. Petersburg.
Kronstadt, or however it's pronounced,
Mhm.
rebellion.
Yeah, I kind of vaguely remember that incident. You asked about today's Marxism. I can share some experience, some weird experience.
I ask because I don't know anyone who's a Marxist.
Yeah, I don't know until 2 weeks ago, 2+ weeks ago. I went to a meeting run by the organization Platitude. What's all the prehistorical
Paleontology.
What's it? Say that again.
Paleontology.
Not
Paleo-
You know
Digging
the.
up dinosaur bones. Is
No. It's
The what?
existing. That's very unique. Prostitute police
What do they
something.
do?
They're studying Marxism. They're studying communism.
Oh,
PLS.
Huh?
PLS.
No. Can't. It's just right at the tip of my tongue. It's an animal. It's an animal, very unique animal.
Platypus.
It's a platypus
huh.
society. Platypus society.
Nice.
Northwestern. What's it called? Northwestern Charter. A platypus.
Yeah, they are very
I went
strange
there.
animals.
Bunch of young people,
The only mammals of
undergrad,
the age.
graduate students, more undergrad than graduate students. They have panelists, they have 4 people. 2 are activist type, Marxism activist type. 1 is the University of Chicago professor, woke type. The other guy is super Marxist type, younger guy. So they call each other comrade. Okay, that was really an eye opener. I was like, whoa, do they really call each other comrade? Like they called each other on a panel one time, and people from the audience continue to do it. I know. Oh, that's how they do it. I thought first just 2 people or 3, right? That's how they do it. Okay, they call each other comrade, and they ask questions. They make statements that I only understand half. Okay, I'm not that steep in that thing. And then we went to lunch. We went to dinner together, and I continued to talk. I was like, wow, that's something else. They really, those young people, college students and graduate students, they really believe in it. So that thing,
This is
that's
still
probably
on platypuses?
yeah,
Okay.
out I'm the only one who wasn't platypus. I just tagged along. Actually, I had the cars. I could draw them there. But I'm not a member, but I had free lunch, free dinner. I got to hear what they said. They're idealistic young people. So I think idealism is one motivation for you, drive you to Marxism.
Wealthy probably too. It's
Well, Northwestern, it can be too,
wealthier.
yeah, you can't be too shabby, right? Northwestern, you can afford Northwestern. So, you know, that's something else.
Well, something that happened is when the industrial workers didn't rise up, there was a need to find a new proletariat, and you know, sometimes, you know, it could be, you know, racial groups, it could be ethnic groups, I mean, it could be a whole gender, all women are oppressed, that sort of thing. And
So you're finding agreement.
but it actually turns classical Marxism on its head, because or gaze is another one. Some of the groups that are considered oppressed tend to be fairly affluent on the average, not every single individual, of course. And I recall reading something once about the daughter of a very, very, very rich family. And, you know, she essentially got, she had some sort of business and she got some contract because she was a woman. You know, she realized what was going on. She said, you know, I'm hardly oppressed, but hey, if they give it to me, I'll take it. You know, my father's a billionaire and I'm going to inherit it all, but, you know, I'm oppressed, therefore I'll take whatever help you could give me.
Was there ever a time where Mao read, or so you have communism in China, was that from Karl Marx, or did Mao reinvent communism from the beginning, or how did...
Yeah, he did. China
It
changes
was basically
Marxism.
Stalinist. I mean, you know.
Yeah, Stalinist in terms of organization, the measures, the means of revolution. I mean, the way they do the revolution. They use Leninist, and the basic ideology is still Marxist, but they change it. Marxism, they change it. That's why they say Chinese Communist Party changes Marxism. They don't just do it
but did Mao
transplant it. They do change it.
Did Mao actually read Stalin?
I doubt it. But I know Deng Xiaoping probably did, because he went to school in Paris in those days. But Mao is steep in the Chinese classics, and he's like a super duper evil politician. He knows how to do politics.
Well,
So he's the leader, but he's not necessarily the theorist.
yeah. Well, Russian communism was based on the idea of the industrial proletariat. China was, at the time of Mao, industrially underdeveloped, so the proletariat became the peasants.
Right.
Yeah,
That's their local condition.
exactly.
They don't have an industry, so they don't have workers, but they have a lot of
The
peasants.
oppressed workers are the peasants.
Yeah. They used land reform to draw the support on the countryside.
And
So
it's
they-
disastrous. That was incredibly disastrous.
Well, it depends on who you ask. Their tactic or their strategy was using the countryside to surround the cities, because cities are elites. They're Kuomintang, the nationalists. They're working with the capitalists from the West.
Right.
But the Mao is working with the Soviets, the Communist International. They're active in the countryside. Well, there's more space in countryside. Also, their plea is to
You're also taking up more of the
land
land.
reform. Land
Yeah.
reform. The peasants like it because
Larger
they're peasants.
footprint.
They're
Yeah.
like serfs. They're serfs. So if land reform, you can get rid of the landlord class.
Right.
They all for it, right? So that's how they won ultimately, because you can they have more people, they have more space. You can control the cities, right? Those are like points. You have to connect those points to have some force, but they have the whole countryside. So
This is the opposite. Like the Industrial Revolution was urbanization. People moved from the farm into the city during the Industrial Revolution, which we said was in the 18th century. But then under Mao's time, you're having people move from the urban areas back out into the country.
Was the
Oh, they did? Oh, I didn't know.
was
What?
the countryside then like taken away from were they like tenant farmers and then given their own land and was distribution?
Yeah, they did that. They did that.
Was that
they
was the term that you used of the reform of the
land reform.
oh.
That's their version of land reform. They just they come into this village. They just who's the landlord? So they go to your house. They get you out of the house. So your house is the public now. And you know, if a farmer one, peasant one, peasant two. Okay, that part of the house is yours. That part of the house. It's like a big complex. If you're a landlord, right? You get that wing, you get that wing, you get that wing, or you get that room, you get that room. So they're happy. And then that part of land, farmland is yours, farmland. They're happy, right? That's how they do it. That's how they did it when they were doing the revolution. But once they founded a country, after a few years, they said, hey, we're going to make them all nationalized. We're going to nationalize all of them. But in the meantime, when they're fighting, in the process of revolution, they need to get the support of the peasants, right? So you can have that land, you can have that part of the house, and but once they're settled, once they have the nation,
Kind of,
then hey, okay, now we go to the next phase. Okay, you all farm for the country, for the people, not for your own family. You still get to farm that piece, but you're organized differently. We have what's it called? I don't know how to translate it. They have this model from the military type of organization, but that's for work, for farm work. So you're part of that structure. You're not farm for your family. You farm for that unit.
For the party.
That ultimately, but each province, each county, each village, they have their like structure, like model from military troops.
So
like you have your
basically-
battalion, you have a company, that sort of thing.
But
So you
in
farm.
effect, it's the same as it was before, just under a different name.
Yeah, but
they were
you
doing
don't
it-
own it anymore. But we were still fighting. We need your support. So I said, you own that piece. You own that piece. You're happy. But once I won the nation, I'm in Beijing. I founded the country. It's a Communist Party now. Okay, now we go to the next phase, right? You don't own it anymore. You work with the structure that I put out for you to organize the production.
Yeah.
So you don't own it anymore. Hey, you have nothing to say because I'm following the communist Leninist path. I'm not violating my promise. That phase is gone. We're in the next phase now. So you have nothing to say. We're heading toward communism.
But what you said is it was mainly Joseph Stalin who helped spread communism into China.
No, they just used Joseph Stalin used material means to support the revolution. They may have one or two advisors.
Did Mao come up with communism on his own, or was he influenced by Karl Marx?
He was influenced by Karl Marx. Yeah.
So Mao one day picked up Capital and said, "Hey, we should
No,
do
he
this
didn't.
in China."
I'm pretty sure he didn't. He's steeped in Chinese culture, classics. He knows how to, because he steeps at, they say from reading history books and Chinese classic books, they figure out how politics works in China.
Okay.
Politics means politics in general, not certain type of politics. So if you want to be a number one politician in China, in this culture,
It's a 5,000-year-old culture.
he's good at it. He already figured it out because he's steep in that. He reads a lot. But as far as the imported the Marxism thing, he's not the guy. but he knows who to ask. He knows Deng Xiaoping. He went to not
So
just
there
him.
had to have been an Engels character in China, is what you just said.
No. Another Chinese guy, who's the brain, who's the theorist. Just like Xi Jinping, he's the leader because he's the best at politics. But he has Wang Huning because
So
I don't
you've
know how
never
to
asked,
translate
so who Mao's
for
underling,
theory,
or who's the
you go for
consigliere?
someone who's good at theory. You go
And who
for
was
someone
that
good
for
at
Mao?
good at economics. You go for someone who's good at theory, or go for someone who's good at propaganda. But you're the leader, just like Mao's time the same way. I'm the leader, but when it comes to theory, I go for you. You help me. You're
Who
the
is it?
advisor.
Who?
Maybe Deng Xiaoping, maybe Zhou Enlai, maybe a couple of other things.
But who in the time of Mao? Who did Mao have? Who was his?
He's the leadership. He knows how to. He knows how to manipulate people.
Said maybe Deng Xiaoping or.
Mao's the one. He knew how to manipulate people.
Yeah, but who was his?
I don't know. Deng Xiaoping, you can use your imagination. Many people, they died early, okay, during the Cultural Revolution or even before, or killed by nationalists. Those are small names, and I read English books, so it's hard for me to translate. If I look it up on DeepSeek, and it was censored. It's the Chinese thing. Okay.
There are no
so I
pictures of
don't use
little
DeepSeek anymore. I use
things,
ChatGPT.
okay.
Not because the model is
I've
inferior,
seen
but because
pictures
it's
of him
censored.
as a
I
journalist.
want some information. That's
But-
most
But he didn't
like
have his,
insignificant
I don't
thing.
know,
They
Roman
censored
name
it.
all
I
that,
can't
you
find
know.
like some communist
that's weird.
figure, in the 1930s. I try to look it up. I type in English because I read English book. I want to know what the Chinese words are. Sorry, we cannot talk about this. Let's talk about something else.
Oh my
That's
goodness,
literally,
really?
I got a response, an LLM. I just type in an English name. It says, sorry, we can't talk about it.
Oh my god.
So I don't do DeepSeek anymore. I do ChatGPT. I do Google. Those
So
are
they won't even talk about these
No.
people? What's his name? Shao and I and.
many small names. I can't even
other
remember.
ones. Oh, okay.
But those are bigger names.
Yeah.
Those are like middle level leaders. Those are the theorists. Those are the brain. Those are the scholars. The top level, they tend to be weak on that. But they're strong in manipulating people. Pick one against another.
But
do
you
the
did say
thing.
that Mao read a lot of classical Chinese books.
That's Chinese side. But he's not the one that combined or married the two sides, the Marxist side with Chinese side. Someone else did it for him. But he's in charge. That's how a leader is.
He's
You're
a
in
cult of
charge.
personality.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah, just because you have bigger brain, you can't challenge
But
me
you never
because
figured
because
out
I'm
who
the
his underling
I'm the
was,
guy.
or-
Yeah, I have power. How did I get power? I know how to deal with
I
people.
know
I know
how
how
to
to
do it.
manipulate people
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
know how in this culture I know how it works
Were a
better.
lot of these people who you can't read about, were they like the people in the late 1930s, the old Bolsheviks, and Stalin got rid of a lot of them? Is that what happened there too, or not?
Yeah, I can say similar.
Okay.
There's a guy, I can remember this Russian name I read in English book. He was an advisor with the Communist Party when they were still fighting the Nationalist Party and like the tough times. And then he was, I guess his term is up or his mission is over. He was back to Soviet Union,
Mm-hmm.
and he was purged by Stalin.
Yeah.
He didn't
So-
end
so
up
there
well.
was a
He
movie
didn't end well.
doctor
Yeah,
who-
so you
a
never
lot
know.
of
You never
people.
know.
You had a
Happens
movie,
to a lot
Dr.
of
Zhivago,
people.
and that's where you had the communists fighting each other.
Right.
In the movie Dr. Zhivago?
Hey,
Dr.
I
Chicago was sympathetic. to
I
the
have
communists
heard
at
that
first.
name, Wang Hunin.
Wang Hunin, yeah.
I've heard that name, and I the only reason I know that name is because Vox Day has talked about him periodically over the years
Oh.
as being China's chief strategist,
Right. We have a different
and that
name
he's
for
like
it.
one of the smartest people in that whole country.
Right. He's the
Who's
theorist.
this?
He can.
Wang Hunin.
Okay. Don't know.
He's the one that.
I think he wrote something called America Against America.
I mean, he's the guy because he's the brain. He knows how to write. He knows how to not necessarily talk. In that culture, in that political culture, oratory is not the thing. But you need to how to write, how to govern, how to communicate with your colleagues, but go out and campaign, give a speech, rally. That's not the thing because it's not needed. right? For that environment to succeed as a politician. Wang Huning, so strategist is too ordinary. There's a Chinese name for it, for him. I will try to translate. It's called the nation's teacher, or nation's master. You know, the nation's affair, that's the go-to person. That's pretty much, what's the nation's affair? Okay, now, we want to have a convincing argument to do, let's say, unify with Taiwan. So Wang Huning, come on, write something. Tell what the leader should say and when to say it. He's the guy. And different things. How do we do the economic reform and still maintain as a socialist country, not become a capitalist country? Okay, you theorize it, you say it, you convince the population. He's the guy. So you want to? Oh yeah, he has served Xi Jinping. You know, Xi Jinping has been 3 terms, right? I think he served even Xi Jinping's predecessor, but he was especially like upheld as the go-to person during Xi Jinping's times, and yeah, if you want to see, he deals with the fundamental stuff. He doesn't deal with this small stuff. For example, Chinese Communist Party, to maintain its legitimacy, they don't want to be called capitalist. So, but they do a lot of things people will think it's capitalist.
Yeah.
So they will say, Wang Huning, come on. You write something, you write an essay, or even a book, or half pamphlet, something, to explain why we're socialist. So we're not betraying our own past or our own predecessors. They found this country for us. They handed it to us. We're not gonna veer away. So we maintain our legitimacy. That's very fundamental, very important for that country, for that regime, in that kind of political culture and political environment. So that's an important thing, monumental. It's fundamental. It's your roots. If you lose your roots, people can get rid of you pretty easily. People can
Because you have
defeat
a
you.
very old, the
People-
United States goes back to 1776, and the Chinese culture is
Right.
5,000 years old.
Right. That's the political culture. They can get rid of you. Of course, if you want to remove a regime, you do it different fronts, right? You better have the military support you or police support you, but you need to theoretically the thoughts. You need to do that front as well. You need to convince people, so people say, hey, you're no longer a Communist Party. You're fake. You're a hypocrite. You don't want to go that path. But that's insidious. That's slow path. But you don't want to go there. That's important too. That's where Wang Huning comes in. Okay, how do you explain away, or how do you make it whole? Like our party is legitimate. We'll still stick to our original ideas. We won the country, right? Out of the traitor of the country, a traitor of the regime, the nationalists. They work with the West, so they're the traitor to the people. We won because we are for the people. People agree with the communism, right? Now you can say, well, in the 2025, you're no longer communism. Or they don't want to be talked about like that. So that's when Wang Huning comes in. Okay, convince the people, convince the world. We're still socialist, and our future is still socialism and communism and stuff. That's where he comes in.
You have in China a lot of the long game, and one of the major things is like rare earth minerals. And we're here, I don't know, watching our MTV, and China's very acutely aware that rare earth minerals are going to be very important in the future, and they really invest early on, and they get almost a stranglehold on the rare earth minerals market, and they're kind of Hamiltonian in that they'll have. It's a big deal when the United States invests in Intel or in material MP, but China will heavily cooperate with BYD or subsidize some of their electric car markets. And now they're going into Europe. Well, we've given loans to Tesla, but Tesla's, the jerk-off CEO, and Tesla's lost serious ground to BYD and to other Chinese car manufacturers.
Yeah, the rare earth thing is I heard like in early 2000s, there's a document or paper coming from, or 2008, 2004, from Pentagon to, I don't know, to White House or something. They were sounding the alarm, say that nowadays rare earths so important for everything, not to mention in defense, for everything. They sounded the alarm, the Chinese have it all.
Yeah.
Because before, in the 1970s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, 2000, they said, well, just let the Chinese do it. Because it's dirty, it could be toxic, the worker could be contaminated.
The process of isolating, there's abundant rare earths, but to isolate it,
it's a very delicate process.
They're magnets.
You refine the process. You can make it better. Better purity. So it's not like, oh, either you can do it or you can't. You can do it, but you can refine it better and better. You can make better chips because it has higher requirement for the purity. So in the beginning, it was like, we can rely on China to do it. That's the time China, U.S. and decent relations, right? We let you in WTO. We can use your cheap labor for our capitalists make a lot of money, so everything's hunky-dory, and that's great. They didn't foresee today's geopolitical tension. So, but Pentagon had that paper. They say, hey, we just can't rely on the Chinese for this strategic materials.
But why didn't you act on it? Why did you just?
They did not. They
complacent.
They complacent.
We
Because
complacent,
there's a
suffering.
difficulty. It's very hard to begin because China already ahead for decades. Because like I said, you figure out how to do it, you can do it, you can make it better, the process better, you can make it cleaner, so the workers will never get sick, and also you increase the purity. That's a decades of accumulation of knowledge and experience, and also you have the expertise. You can't find a dozen people in America who know how to do it.
Really?
You have to start the programs in labs, in universities. You have to have people who are willing to apply, to make them their major or master's, doctorate. You have to start from scratch. If all those years, U.S. has lost it all. Like in the 1980s, U.S. still have like 10% like output of the whole world. 10% is in the U.S. Now you kind of probably have 2% or something. You know, the expertise is staying, if you don't use it, you lose it. And you want to get it back, well, you have to work on the new generation. You know, how long it takes to educate a person, right? And the person is educated, got a degree, not enough. You have to have structure for him to dedicate to it, to gain experience, to do the real world thing.
Well,
you out of school, you just have theory. You can't do anything.
And you know what kind of sucks? As a general matter of like, because this is, I think you could argue this is sort of in the realm of STEM, right? What really sucks is
DEI.
Well, yes. I wasn't even going to mention that, but yes, that's true.
What?
DEI. You don't have the merit-based.
Sorry, I tried to finish the sentence.
No, but there's that, and then there's also the thing where you get the younger generations who have been told, like, you know, don't study the BS, you know, feminist basket weaving, you know, majors in college. You know, do the real stuff that counts. You know, like it's STEM, it's, you know, learn to code and all that kind of stuff. And then what happens is they graduate with mountains of debt, and then these companies are like, you know what, we like these H-1B imports better because they're cheaper and we can take advantage of them. By holding citizenship stuff, they're at our mercy in a way that American workers would never be.
I work with those people.
And so we tell our young people, do this and you'll get ahead, and then we kick them right in the nuts on the
because you pay less for H-1B foreign workers.
Yeah. And so what you'll end up having a lot of times is,
We're wicked.
from what I've heard, is what you'll have is. you'll have
They're
like
pretty decent
people who are
chips.
fortunate
I think
enough to
there's still a
have
few
certain
left.
STEM
I'll take
positions,
that.
right?
Oh.
What they'll do is they'll go ahead
I'm not gonna
and they'll be the companies will force them
Yeah, exactly.
to
That's why I'm
train
not-
their H-1B replacements.
Oh,
And it's like,
well,
my
yeah.
first instinct would be, no, I'm not doing that, but I think the way they do that is they have leverage in like, well, if you don't train your replacement, you won't get severance.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have leverage over you.
Right.
So
They don't have a
this is part of
shortage
what
of
got
leverage.
Trump elected is that he called this out. too.
Correct.
Whereas
Correct.
Clinton was kind of the one who was the globalist and, yeah, outsource as much as you want, you know, bring in as many H-1Bs as you want, and Trump had that empathy towards the, yeah.
Which, you know, it's interesting, he seems to have lost that recently.
Seems to
Yes.
have gone
Like-
180 degrees.
Do we want to continue to record, or it's almost
No.
3 hours, or we just
No,
call
no.
it? No? Okay.
That's
Oh,
a
so let it
supreme
go.
leader decision right there, man.
You want to